all kinds of things happening tonight. So we're going to get going right away and keep moving here. I'd like you all to know I'm calling this meeting to order and I need a roll call.
Mrs. Roderick? Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mrs. G?
Here,
Mrs. Oliver?
here. Thank you. Please join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Recognition of the public, remember, it happens at every monthly meeting. We do have someone this evening, Mrs. Wise, who wants to speak about a Wyoming middle school drama. If you'd like to come up there, then the camera will pick you up. Sorry, but it is.
So my name is Roswitha Wise. I volunteered this year for the Wyoming Middle School Drama Program. We put on 2 shows in the fall. It was a drama, Holiday Dream. And this past spring, it was Once on This Island, the musical. So about 60 kids, both combined with cast and crew, participated between the 2 performances. So 60 in the fall and about 60 in the spring. And unlike other extracurricular activities offered at the middle school, some with smaller numbers, we did not have a supplemental position to support us. We were strictly all parental volunteers. And so all of the work fell to parents, and I don't think this is sustainable in the long run. Liz Galvin kind of spearheaded to try and get the drama program started up again this year after COVID. She had reached out to Spring Pillow during the summer, who then contacted her contacts at the Children's Theater of Cincinnati to get a contract put into play, and then also set up the first meeting that we had in October to drum up parental support. So we got a late start to begin with. That's why the drama was in the fall. And then at that first parental meeting, that's when the parents first became involved. Liz Galvin, Kristen Stewart-Stockton, myself, Kate Weedy, we formed the core team to get this drama production on started, and we held auditions then at the beginning of October. We had no idea what was stated in the contract that the school signed with TCT. We knew that in the past, the school was responsible, or parent volunteers were responsible for costuming, lights, sound, and sets and props. We did not know until later that we were also supposed to be responsible for choreography. And we did not have anybody to hit that or take care of that. So luckily TCT picked up the slack and did that for us, even though that's not in their contract. And so they provided a service they didn't get paid for. Liz Galvin took care of all of the organization, coordination between the school and TCT, as well as trying to recruit additional parent volunteers, plus lots of other things. She found out later that what she was doing had previously been done by 4 parent volunteers, plus the previously when the school did provide a supplemental position. So she was filling the role of 5-6 people. So there were also some other issues. When Stuart Stockton finally was able to go into the tech booth, he found out that mic packs did not have belt clips, so there was no way for the mics to be attached to the kids' costume. He found buckets of batteries labeled good, bad, maybe good. Kids were testing the batteries with their tongues to see if they still had charge left. Resourceful, but not exactly. Lights weren't working. Kate was responsible for props. I was doing set. We could not work or do anything for that unless we stayed after rehearsal, which we did. So from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, we were there in the evening, putting sets and props together for the shows, because we could not get in there on the weekends unless we chased the basketball team in to try and get time to set up the stage or dress the stage at a time when another activity was going on. So if I don't know as coordinator for sets, if I'm gonna be able to get into the school, I can't recruit other parents to help me put the set together. So a lot of that responsibility fell solely on me. Also, there's a lack of resources when it comes to what's in the workshop. When I went into the workshop, there was a single screwdriver and a drill from the 1970s and a circular saw. So I was building stuff in my garage and shuttling it back here. Or I finally got to the point where I loaded everything in my car and drove it to the school and worked on the stage and then cleaned up at the end of the evening so that the stage would be clean the next day in case it needs to be used. We've also got a storage problem. Props are everywhere, haphazard bins piled underneath the stairwell. If you need to get to something, you risk other stuff falling on top of you. Christy Stockton stored costumes in her laundry room at her house. There are bins piled high. When we have to make access for a child that is in a wheelchair, we have to shift all the boxes to actually make room for her to come in to actually change into her costume. The gentleman that is renovating the restaurant that used to be a wine shop, he has tons of wood that he salvaged. He's offered it to the middle school set department, and given the cost of wood, I would love to get it. I have nowhere to put it. He's temporarily going to store it in his church, and hopefully that works. But we really do need a supplemental position associated with drama. You wouldn't ask a sports team to rely solely on parental support or parental volunteers to run a sports program. We're asking that same courtesy is given to the drama program. We use science, technology, engineering, and math to create sets to produce lighting and sound displays. My daughter for the last production made circle skirts. I gave her an entire math lesson on how the patterning goes for a circle skirt. You ask my kids, I can make a math lesson or a science lesson about anything. And we're also getting art. The kids are learning dialogue, song, and dance. It's a STEAM program. So we would like support in the way of funding for a supplemental position for drama.
Thank you. Sorry, writing that down. Thank you. Now we have a number of special presentations this evening. I believe what we'll do is start with the CAC presentations. Is there anything you want to say, you two being CAC, to set this up, or do we just turn it right over to standards-based grading practices at the primary level?
I would say I would just say how hard they've been working. So part of me is like, I'd like you to hear what they have to say first, and we can chime in since we got to hear it.
All right, thank you. Yes,
okay
because
with
we'll all
that?
have
Maybe
questions
we'll
afterwards. If you would like to
everybody and
take that position there, please, and I will move out of the way. So I'm not in the screen.
Well, I just wanted to start off and say hello and thank you for your time. I'm going to introduce you to our committee. I am Ashley Lang, second grade teacher at Elm. I have a first grader and a third grader also in the district. I am joined by Ross Bartels. He is a product designer, father of 4 children. He has a second grader at Hilltop Kindergartner at Vermont, preschooler, and a newborn. We also have Laura Lee Murley. Her background is in scientific research. She has 3 children. 2 of them are seniors at the high school and a junior in college. And we also have Tyler Steins, who is an intervention specialist at the middle school. Our administrator resource contact for our team is Gina Kirshner, who is the principal for Wyoming Primary Schools. We have designed our presentation as a summary of our findings. You will be able to see many more details in our literature handout, which I know Tyler will be referencing when he presents. To help guide our thinking and research, you can see our study objectives. They include how do our current primary grading practices compare with other highly effective school districts? How can we best provide feedback to parents on student achievement and growth? And when are letter grades introduced and most effective in reporting student progress? The sequence of our presentation, I'm going to start off with an examination of our current Wyoming grading practices. And then Ross, Laura, and Tyler will dig into the meta-analysis of grading practices in the last 100 years, compiled data from highly performing school districts within our area, expanding our search nationwide, and then how it was used to determine when letter grades were introduced. Before I begin, it is important to note and mention that there have not been any primary report card revisions in Wyoming in the last at least 20 years. During that time frame, we have shifted into Common Core standards, and our field is very standards and data driven. Taking a look at our current report cards, this is an example of a K-1-2 report card where you can see our marking system includes satisfactory, progressing, needs improvement, and not applicable. The kindergarten does have a slight difference as far as mastered or developing. Some of the other categories, this is just a snippet of the report card. We also have listening and speaking, writing, math, science and social studies, health, and specials. With first grade and second grade, these are sent out quarterly, so there's 4 per year. And then kindergarten, it's 2 per year at the end of each semester. Here is a small section from a 3rd grade to 4th grade report card. This is where you can see we have letter grades introduced. Again, as far as other categories, we've got behavior, language arts, math, science, social studies, health, and specials. With our current report cards, it is not clear on what standards are assessed in order to earn the different grades or marking systems. We obviously do our best as educators to communicate that by other means through newsletters, conferences, papers home, etc. We are using programs, however, that provide standards-based detailed reports for every student that would help make a transition if there was one to standards-based report cards. Here is an example of one of those programs. This is Envision's Math. This is a section pulled where the left-hand side would show individual students, and you can see where students are performing within the different standards for that particular assignment. Each box is clickable, and you can pull up the different questions and how they relate to the standards. Here is an example of a student within a program known as MobyMax. MobyMax does contain a variety of subjects. This year, 2nd grade has access to vocabulary and language. This is something where we can send out assignments. We can do pre-tests, post-tests, and again, get all of the data related to that for each student. Here is, I am part of a piloting of a program called Lexia. This is literacy based. This, for example, is again just a section of some standards. If you were to look at the 3rd row down, standard 2.1F, this is producing and expanding, rearranging sentences. You can see this particular student within her assessments of Lexia shows 100%. Same student back on MobyMax, she also is showing 100%. So it's very clear to me as the educator with this kind of information, as well as my informal and formative assessments and grading of her published writing, it is very clear that that obviously is a standard that she has mastered. Some other things that we have very detailed reports for are the MAP, benchmark assessments showing achievement and growth for reading and math. This is something that we are sharing out with parents at benchmark times, where we are showing if students are performing above, on, or below grade level. So as you can see, our reports are very specific, giving us information about what we can reinforce with students, what we can continue to develop or introduce. We have very beneficial tools. They just don't align with current report cards. Next, Tyler is going to be talking about grading practices of other districts.
As we gained an understanding of where Wyoming is currently in their grading practices, we sought to not only go to other districts, but also look at current research around grading practices. And we found a meta-analysis of over 100 years of data compiled of traditional grades. And what it came out with were two main findings, and that were teacher assigned grades, that's A, B, C, were ultimately subjective and unreliable. I think about my own kind of interaction, both as a teacher and as a student. I think about how something like homework can impact so much of a student's grade. Does homework really determine whether a kid knows math or not? Not really. I think there's a lot of factors that go into grades that ultimately show no correlation to a kid actually understanding the material or not. And that's what that research showed. Again, that subjective nature and the ultimate unreliability of them. In our research, we found really a growing body of evidence to suggest that a shift to standards-based grading would ultimately provide more detail and a better reporting system for teachers to give to parents. And what standards-based grading is instead of taking an average of all assignments and calculating that into a final grade, a student's achievement is really reported on each individual standard. And I think it's helpful to see a few examples of what that looks like. And again, Roz can go in further detail, but just to show you, if we think back to the current Wyoming report card in that small language arts section, this is an example of a report card from Marymount who uses that standards-based grading system. You can see that within the language arts, those skills are broken down much more specific and are related to those Common Core state standards that Ashley mentioned earlier. That same report card also gives feedback on these engaged student characteristics. Those are more behavioral type things. So not only are they breaking it down standards in terms of academics, but also the behavior as well. This is an example of an Indian Hill report card in grade 2. And again, I'd like to point out on that math section, just the detailed breakdown of each of those individual skills. Each one of those is tied to the Common Core state standard. As a parent, when you get that report card, you know exactly where your kid is. Right? A lot of our parents like to be engaged, like to be told exactly where their student is. So if they want to provide extra support for those students, please give a really accurate breakdown of that. These are multiple other examples of report cards. I know it is small there, and while they're each laid out different, it's still the same in the sense that the skills are broken down and that reported progress is indicated again on those specific skills tied to standards. So as we looked at where we were at the current research, we wanted to know what other local districts are doing as well. And in our literature and the report that we passed out, we reference the full appendix of the districts that we looked at. But for everyone else, we looked at 8 highly performing school districts within our area and within Ohio. 8 out of those 8 districts utilize some form of standards-based grading at some point in their elementary school. On average, these districts don't introduce letter grades actually until grade 4.8. Right now, we do currently at grade 3. We looked not only locally, but we wanted to also see what schools nationally were doing. In order to do that, we turned towards the Stanford Educational Opportunity Project, which, again, when you have more time, I'd highly encourage anyone to check this out. The people at Stanford collected data over 10 years of state test data. And what they were able to do is compile a report for each district. I'm gonna try to find little Wyoming here. It's kind of hard to find. Right there. And what it does is it reports not only test scores, but it also reports learning rates. And that's what we were interested for our presentation as well. We sought districts nationally that had extremely high learning rates. And these districts were a combination of districts that were bigger in size, different socioeconomic statuses. And of those 11 schools that we researched in that, 9 of those utilized these standard-based grading practices as well, indicating to us that of these schools that have the higher learning rates, again, they're utilizing these practices as well. And that appendix is on page 7 of that report for the list of schools there. On average, they're introducing those letter grades at grade 4.2. Ross is now going to come up for our recommendations based on our research. All right.
So I bet you guys are all excited to find out what we recommend, and I bet you can predict what we are recommending. But what we're basically recommending is transitioning K through 4 to a fresh, I'm going to say fresh because K through 2 is kind of already a little bit standard-based, but a fresh standard-based grading model rather than the traditional model. We think that because it not only improves the communication between the teacher and the student and the parent, but it also allows the student to potentially excel in growth because there's more feedback opportunities for that child throughout the year. We're also recommending that to do this, we kind of set up a team. So it could consist of some administrators as well as teachers. Now the teachers who would be creating these report cards would be the teachers in that grade, right? So there'd be a group or a committee per grade in that primary grade level. And then we also kind of recommend periodically bringing in parents of students that would be attending that grade because it might be good feedback to get parent comments on what they think is working or any. We would also be part of that parent group as being SCAC members and from our research. We did speak to Shannon Kramer from Marymount, and she is the director of learning and teaching and learning. And so when Marymount rolled out, they did a kind of a phase rollout. They didn't do it all like immediately where they did immediately like the next year they transitioned everyone into standard-based, because the problem with that is you get letter grades, like a 3rd grader could get letter grades, and then 4th grade they get standard-based, and it might be confusing. So what we're recommending is 2 options. We could do a slower version, which would be a 3-year rollout. And in this case, we look at the K through 2 standard-based report card. We give it a fresh look. We keep 3 through 4s the same as traditional. Get some feedback on what's working, what's not working, so that in year 2 we work on the transition on 3rd grade, and then year 3 would be transitioning 4th grade into standard-based. Or you could potentially do a faster rollout where we revise the K through 2 as well as the 3rd for year 1, and then year 2 we'll update the 4th grade to standard-based report card. And what I'd like to reference, so for those who might have this this paper, I'd like to reference this as we go through the template of what we recommend potentially this report card could potentially include. So the first part would be on Appendix C. So, and this is kind of traditional of what we currently have. We have a header with student information, teacher, the year, the principal. It's just basically the standard information that is necessary on the report card that kind of gives that guidance on who's teaching the class and things like that. We also recommend the performance academic key. So this would create new language. So it would get away from terminology like what Ashley said, where it was satisfactory and progressive, and maybe something a little bit more feedback oriented. So if you go to page appendix D, there's a couple options where these are other schools like from Marymount or Chelmsford, where they kind of use different terminology that really gets into leveling out that standard. The third part, and this is different or unique, it would be in appendix E, and this is expectations for the quarter, which is kind of nice. So currently our report cards don't provide anything that the student can actually reach for. It just kind of tells them where they're at this level or at this stage of the game. And what's nice about like an example, so this is from Marymount's kindergarten class, but it gives like how many letters they should, lowercase levels, like what they know and what they don't know. And so it kind of gives an update for the parent as well as the student to kind of understand where they stand and what their expectation is by the end of the year that they need to be at. The third part is the standard base. Now, obviously, this is, you have your focus area. Tyler kind of explained, but this would be looking at the standards and rewording each standard based off of what's currently used in the state, as well as what the teachers kind of recommend in their classrooms. So it's kind of tailored towards that age range. And then the last part, which is obviously the most important, is the comment section, because this provides feedback for the parents as well as the student, specifically on that student growth. And so the next part, I'm going to pass off to Laura.
So I'm just here to give the summary of the objectives and our recommendations. And so our first objective was to determine how our current primary grade practices compare with other highly effective school districts. And what we found was that many other highly performing schools, both locally and nationally, utilize the standards-based grading policies, unlike Wyoming City schools. Next, we wanted to look at how we could best provide feedback to parents on student achievement and growth. And we recommended a shift to a standards-based report card. Oops, sorry. That's a change. We've identified some report card features that we would recommend, including some of the features that Ross just talked about. But what we really recommend is that that we form small committees of grade level educators, administrators, and parents to really work out what should be each part of the standards within the. And then the last question we looked at was, when are letter grades introduced, and when are they most effective in reporting student progress? And what we actually found was that there was not a definitive grade where where it's accepted that this is the right time to introduce grade level standards. What we noticed was that often when students are changing from one school to another, that's when letter grades would start to be introduced. But there's really not a lot of research on the best time, but we found on average it happened during grade 4. That's our presentation. Any questions?
Gentlemen, do you have any questions? We'll start with the guys. Oh,
Cecilia, like Heather, I was able to listen to the original presentation and ask a few questions then, so I'm going to pause and let others jump in before I ask any.
Hey, this is Justin. I did have a question. This first of all, great presentation. I loved it. I'll ask the question around the standards-based grading. Are there any downsides that you saw from your analysis with different school districts, like the time it takes teachers to do the evaluation, or consistency, or anything like that? And if we were to implement something like this, that we want to keep in mind.
So I think for consistency is actually better. I think that the standards-based grading actually makes a more consistent grading. I'm going to let Tyler answer some of this too.
Sure, and in talking with our current primary staff actually utilizes a lot of reports that are already standards-based grading. So in terms, and this is not a research-based or definitive answer, but a lot of our primary staff actually feel like they're doing more work because they're taking their standards-based reporting and then translating that into the current system of grading practices that they currently have. I think one potential downfall is just the newness of it and people being unfamiliar. So I think as a group and when we talk to different districts about rolling it out, it's important to be very strategic about what information is presented to students, how that information is rolled out, and just the overall development of that plan.
And we have a kind of a review of what some other schools have done when they rolled it out. That's at the end of our report.
Great, thank you.
I guess it's a question. Thinking about the level of detail that's in some of this, it kind of sounds like the teachers are already working and kind of communicating with parents and kids about how they're doing on a certain standard. So it may be something kids are already used to, but I sort of picture like young parents of younger children getting this and going, oh my gosh, they don't know 52, like it's so specific, but it just sounds like maybe this kind of as the new generation is coming up with more data, they're more accustomed than, the first thing I did when I got report cards when my kids were little is go straight to the comments section. I wanted more of the written feedback that was something personal to my child. So I was glad to see that, there is room for that, but it seems like at whatever point we switch to whatever we have, at some point there was a lot of taking out of the teacher comments. So I think in some way, if we can keep that sort of feedback going at report card time, even though you're kind of getting that ongoing feedback, I think is an important part of it. I don't know if it's so much of a question, but just comments about the specificity of the data.
I think for us, in kind of as a group, I think the comment section was one of the first things that we were like, this is a necessity, right? I think parents, teachers spend a ton of time on their comments, and that's really where they want to, spend their focus. I think in terms of the breakdown of the specific standards, I think in some ways it becomes more an objective thing and less subjective in some ways. I think parent could receive a C or a D on the report card, and all of a sudden it's the teacher doesn't like my student for whatever reason, right? Whereas a presentation of achievement based on standards is more of an objective. This is where your child is. This is how we can best help your child move forward. But to your point, I think the comments section is paramount, very important.
As a parent, I kind of agree. My kids did Montessori K preschools. We came to elementary schools, and it felt like you got a lot less information, from about how your student was doing in specific things. And I thought this was a real strength of standards-based grading. But you do really have a sense of where your student is doing very well and where they need support.
So what kind of communication would this add up to be, since we are already looking at the other assessments such as math or some of the other assessments we're looking at? Are you already presenting to parents each time these things come in, or are you going to expand, or are you going to condense into these new standards-based report cards, if that's where we're headed?
I'll speak to that a little bit. So this year, for the first time, we are communicating out the math information, which is where their students are performing for reading and math, either on, above, or below benchmarks. That I would foresee continuing to be shared. Like I mentioned earlier, conferences are really a time where we are able to communicate with parents a little bit more in depth with the specific standards. And just to speak a little bit to, right now, for example, on our current report card, it says something like, comprehends what is read. Okay, well, what does that mean? Is that fiction? Is that nonfiction? Is that the characters, the setting, the plot? What does that look like when they answer questions about their story? How does fluency look? So I feel like standards-based information, sharing that out to parents, is more detailed and more specific for them to help their child, in different ways and support what we're doing in the classroom. And also the students to understand, I think like Ross mentioned, where are we growing? What is progressing?
So you would continue with what's in place now and also kind of replace this one. Okay.
I'm just curious, one other thing, since you're already kind of doing a lot of formative assessments along the way, do you feel that this kind of communication with families, and I'm genuinely curious, takes pressure off of kids? Or is pressure inducing to feel like they're being assessed all the time? Like in a way I could see where it would help because you have good communication about where your child is and, hey, this is normal development and this is what they're working on. And, or it could be, oh my gosh,
I think from our research that we found, it was actually less stressful for students as we've gone through. I think opening up that conversation about what our students are at an earlier age kind of takes some of that pressure off. And I found this again in the research and just in our own classrooms at the middle school level in 6th grade. But having that open and honest conversation with students and sharing where they are and the growth that they're making, I think is really valuable. And I think holding those conversations back could present some of that anxiety, right? Presenting that at a younger age, I think that becomes more of a culture in the school, and that becomes more of the standard practice that kids are used to.
Yeah, you could see why maybe the argument for grades not, that getting bumped up to a higher grade when you introduce grades in the.
I also think it creates a culture of feedback, right? Like it's all about, and I think that's a positive environment to be in at this age level.
I liked your comments about expectations too. That keeps us looking forward, not always, well, let's go back and pick that up. Let's see where we're headed next.
And I love it for so many reasons, because even if you have a strength in that subject, then you still know how you can keep growing. So you keep talking about how we're growing all the students in any capacity. And if you're struggling in an area, because we all talk to kids and you're like, what do you think you're having a hard time with? They're like, oh, I don't know. I just know I'm not getting it, right? So it sounds like for you all, hearing it again, just the amount of work you're putting into it anyway, streamlines it. For me personally, the first time you all said it, I didn't have a lot of questions. So it sounds wonderful to me that since you have shifted to standards-based, there's been so many changes over the past 20 years. It makes sense to kind of move forward and adapt in some manner.
Okay.
When we met with the CAC too, we talked about this partnership and just, building that partnership between the school and the family and being aligned and being really clear about what we can do to help students be successful. And so anything we can do to improve upon that partnership.
I should think it would also be useful for kids who come into the school at a different grade level, suddenly new with 2nd grade, see exactly where we are. Therefore have our expectations for them.
Yeah, I do think helping families understand the transition will be a big deal. And so those teams, those grade level teams that you suggested to take this and create those documents, developing tools would be important and helpful.
Even to see when it's introduced, like that it's not always 3rd grade and why we do it at 3rd grade and why we might, just even different considerations of what that looks like.
Well, I liked your 2-year plan because it seems to me the 2nd graders are already getting this with their math assessments and all, so it's not going to be a shock to them as a 3rd grader to stay in that same form, and that way we move along a little faster.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
gentlemen. Okay, guys have some.
Iliad's
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. It's tough jumping in. I didn't want to be rude and cut anyone off.
Oh, no.
I continue to be hopeful that we will look at what we might see as any considerations that we hadn't considered as we consider a move. My hope, honestly, would be that the longer we keep the kids and the parents in the conversation on how they're progressing on standards that we know are fundamental as foundations for their development and their capability long-term, and not focus on what is my grade, I think the better off we are. I actually think the reaction for many parents and even the kids begin to get that engagement with parents when the grades start showing up around whether they're meeting the expectation of the parent and the all A's kind of thing, what have you. So I would be very encouraged by keeping the focus on the conversation about where the kid is in the development of some of those fundamentals. For me, I think it's simpler without the grades. And for us, with the K through 1 through 4, I would love to have that be something we don't do in the elementary school, at all. And 5th grade, I wouldn't have to do it that early, but I trust the people who look at this a lot more on how or when we think about that. One question for me relative to the committees. I thought when we talked about this before, we said there would be a different committee for each grade level. And the one thing I'd be curious about is how would we preserve sufficient consistency with regard to whatever those committees were choosing and working on, so we weren't getting meaningfully different outcomes from the 5th grade committee versus the 3rd or the 4th grade committee.
I can speak to that a little bit. I really think that that's part of what our role as leaders would be kind of bridging and creating a framework that would be sustained across those different grade levels. And really facilitating what are those standards that we're going to report on, and how do we create that consistency and that alignment from grade to grade.
Thank you for the response.
Excellent presentation.
I know.
I
Good
learned
job.
a lot.
Thank you.
Well
done. I look forward to doing this in depth. That's great. All right, thank you. Now we have another group, primary facilities. And I'll get out of their way in a second. Give me 1 second.
Good evening, Board of Education members and community members. Our team was given the opportunity to research optimal learning and the possible long-term solutions for improving our primary facilities and the associated costs for potential solutions. I invite you to think about how we as a community can continue to have a positive impact on our very youngest learners. I'll introduce our committee members. David Ambrose is a teacher at the high school. He has 2 boys that attend the high school, and he's been a community member for 17 years. He's not in attendance tonight because he is either at a lacrosse game or practice or something lacrosse related. I'm Lynn Haid. I've been a community member and previous guidance counselor at the middle school. I have 2 boys, one at the primary and one at the middle school, and I've been a community member for 17 years as well. Marta Stewart.
Hi, I'm Marta Stewart. I am one of the committee members. I am currently a 3rd grade teacher at Vermont Primary in the Wyoming State School District. And I am actually born and raised Wyoming alumni. I love Wyoming and all the people in it.
And 7th grade girls basketball coach.
Yes, and I'm a girls basketball coach. Thank you. That's important too. How could you leave that out?
Toya Wall, in attendance tonight. She works in education philanthropy. She's lived in Wyoming for almost 2 years, and she has a 4-year-old daughter. And Jan Wilking, she's not here tonight either. She's our athletic director for the past 9 years and the business manager for the past 2 years. And she was our district representative that helped us on our committee. All right, so our agenda, we're going to start with an overview of our objectives. Then we'll talk a little bit about how we approach this study. We'll share a snapshot of the state of our primary facilities. We'll share our findings, what our research revealed about the current physical state of our primary facilities and its connection to optimal learning environments. And finally, we will conclude with our recommendations. We wanted to ground this presentation in purpose. Our purpose is simple: As our facilities age, the cost of maintaining them becomes an increasing issue. This provides us with the wonderful opportunity to take a look at the integrity of our learning spaces and the extent to which they contribute to high quality instruction and excellent resources for all students, faculty, and staff. As you'll learn, all of our primary facilities were built more than 5 decades ago. Elm and Vermont are 52 years old, and Hilltop is 62 years old. We know so much more now about what our children need to thrive. The past 50 years has brought many changes to education and how our students learn and how they are taught. Looking to the future and how to best prepare our youngest learners is of utmost importance. Wyoming values public education and the resources we provide our kids to give them a high-quality instruction. As times are evolving, we recognize our primary facilities are in need of updating. We can't do nothing. We have an opportunity to provide excellent resources alongside our excellent educational offerings. We have 2 study objectives: to research the possibilities for long-term solutions to improving our primary facilities and creating optimal learning environments, and to understand the costs and benefits of those solutions. Our approach: optimal learning environment. First, we asked ourselves, what is an optimal learning environment? It is a working definition that we'll share on the next slide. We sent out a survey to our faculty. All the primary faculty were surveyed, and it was anonymous, and we will be sharing those results in our presentation as well. We looked at what the cost was to maintain our current facilities by reviewing an existing facilities audit. We attended a site visit at an elementary school in Harrison, Ohio, and then we will wrap up with our opportunities. Our guiding definition: learning environments are optimized when teachers create opportunities for students to learn by doing and to actively engage with materials and people. It is important to design physical and social environments that maximize instructional effectiveness and support learning for all. We feel that our guiding definition of an optimal learning environment provides the importance of connection between both physical and instructional learning space for students. Okay, so I don't know if when we practiced this, I had to come up there because I'm not very good at just standing back here. So I don't know if there's like a laser or okay. Do I hold it? Okay. All right. So this.
Yeah.
There it is.
We got it.
I'm just
gonna follow it, right?
It's green.
There. Once it goes on the screen, it goes away.
It goes away.
Okay.
And I
so
You
I'm
can go
gonna-
up there. Go ahead.
Just because I can't stand for a place. So obviously, I mean, you can read our chart, but the original construction, we have the high school, the middle school, and then our 3 primaries are together: Elm, Hilltop, Vermont, and then the board office. So original construction date, years that renovations were completed, the square footage of each building, and our total PI funds spent in the last 10 years, and the PI funds spent per square foot, the acres of property, and then the acreage of roofing. So we'll be discussing these in a little bit more depth later in our presentation, but PI funds spent per square foot is of importance, and you can see those 2 numbers there that are highlighted. So PI funds, permanent improvement funds, that's what PI stands for. They are monies that the district collects from the permanent improvement levy that allows for dollars to be allocated strictly for the upkeep, replacement, and construction of assets valued over $10,000. These funds do not cover everyday maintenance items like toilet paper or paint for a room, but rather for replacing or repairing concrete, the roof, or renovating an instructional space. These funds are used to maintain the structures that we have, not to build new buildings or additions. We looked at the total PI funds spent by building and calculated the amount spent per square foot to provide a comparison as to how much we are spending in each building to maintain what we currently have. While you could look at this chart and say, we haven't spent much of the primaries to maintain, in total, you would be accurate. But per square foot, we are spending more at Elm and Hilltop than at the middle school in Vermont. We're spending nearly as much as at the high school, where we have done significant work, including all of the athletic facilities, new turf on the field, new track, tennis courts, etc. This also provides some comparison to slide 8, which will show what we are projected to spend in the next 5 years. I'm sorry, it won't be slide 8. I think it's like slide 12. We had some adjustments. This is our current reality. We also examined projected enrollment trends. Currently, the primary schools have 721 students enrolled. 194 students are at Elm, 213 students at Vermont, and 314 students at Hilltop. The enrollment for the next 10 years, based on birth rates and past data analysis, is projected to remain close to our current enrollment numbers. So current realities, I'm going to come back up here. So these are a few little snapshots of the tours that I did of the 3 primaries, just to kind of give you a visual of what things look like. We have a couple of classrooms featured here. You can see there's a lot of desks in there. Some of our classes have 24 students. You get all the kids in there, their backpacks, their coats, supplies that they use on a daily basis, supplies teachers have. This is a picture of a storage closet that is used for the gym class as well as for the after-school program. This is a picture of one of our teachers' lounges at Vermont, and you can see that this is used also as a storage space for the music class, and there are carts for the music class and the art class as well, because there is no designated space in those buildings for those classrooms. Those classes are taught by the teacher going into the classroom where the kids have spent all day, and they go in and they teach their special class. And then this is a picture here of one of our support staff members who is working on some stuff, and then her space that she works one-on-one with students is just at a table right behind her. So you can see some storage needs, things like that. So an optimal learning environment should have both physical and social environments that maximize instructional effectiveness to support all students' learning. I will now share with you some images of our current reality in Wyoming's primary buildings in regards to the physical space that our students spend their days learning. I will also show you examples of optimal learning spaces, which we were able to experience when we visited Miami Whitewater Elementary in January. So our first slide here, you can see on the left, that is our classroom, small, little crowded. On the right, those 2 pictures are from, like I said, Miami Whitewater, and they're spacious, they're clean, ample storage in the desks and for students and their supplies. These are the hallways. The 2 featured on the left are our hallways are narrow, cluttered, and used for overflow of supplies and extra student desks, versus the picture on the right, spacious, clean, and welcoming. This is the teacher workspace and storage on the left. Our storage and teacher workspace is over capacity. Teacher resources are kept in a pull-out classroom. So I'll just, I hate to keep coming up here, but I'm the one, which one was it? Yes. Thank you, Gigi. Okay, you don't have to. So teacher resources are kept in this classroom, in a pull-out classroom space where the teacher, it could be a reading specialist or a speech pathologist working with students. If a teacher needs to access any of these materials, they have to walk through the class that is in session and interrupt the instructional time that a student is receiving in a small group or one-on-one. To the left, in that storage closet, items are stacked near to the ceiling, and as you can see, it also houses the floor cleaning machine and other custodial supplies. Versus the two pictures on the right, the space, these are two workrooms. I think they had a total of 3 in this building that we were in. Granted, it was a larger building and housed more students than ours do, but the space is clean, inviting, and has ample storage. The cafeteria. All 3 of our primary buildings, the cafeteria is also the gym space and the stage performance area. At times, if the space is available, music class is sometimes held in the gym instead of in a classroom. At 2 of our primaries, again, like I said before, 2 of our primary class or buildings do not have a designated classroom for music or for art. Versus on the right, the cafeteria space is clean, open, bright, and inviting, and an inviting place to eat lunch. This space also has a stage to the left. The section that's painted green is a stage that they have, and it can be utilized for performances, meetings, and other programs. And at this school, there is a separate gym, so none of this space is used for the gym. Continuing our focus on what optimal learning looks like, we specifically asked ourselves if each of the current conditions existed at each of our primary buildings. Our Spanish, art, and music teachers all travel to multiple buildings, so keep that in mind. So, is there adequate classroom size? None of our primary schools have adequate classroom size. Is there an art music room? Hilltop is the only school currently that has a designated classroom for music and for art. There is no space at any of our primaries designated for specific pull-out or breakout rooms for students who take a break that are overstimulated, or teachers to work with kids one-on-one, optimally functioning HVAC. All of our buildings are struggling in this area. The buildings are either too hot or too cold. Reliable connectivity that has to do with Wi-Fi and supporting all the technology that we use today. A Spanish room, again, another class that's been added for our curriculum for our youngest learners. None of our elementary schools have a space designated as a Spanish classroom. And then finally, storage. As the picture showed, you can see that there's a lot of space that's needed for many different items that are in an elementary school. So now I'm going to turn the remainder of the presentation over to Marta, who will go over our findings and our recommendations.
All right, so as Lynn has visually detailed and shared with you our current realities of our primary schools here in Wyoming, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about the cost just to maintain our current primary facilities. Now, I would like to draw your attention to some of our financial findings in our presentation. If you look at the top of our chart, that it signifies the total PI funds spent in the last 10 years. Before I continue on, just to remind everyone, the PI funds are the permanent improvement funds. Again, those can be used to improve different aspects of our schools, such as repairing concrete or roofs or renovating an instructional space. But these funds are not used or designated to build new buildings and additions. So just to keep that in mind as we're looking at these details here. So you'll see at the top section, we have all 3 of the different financial values of each of the schools and what we've been putting into over the last 10 years in regards to those PI funds. If you look at the second section now, these are projected PI funds to spend in the next 5 years. And so I want you to look at the comparison between each of those independent schools, Elm, Hilltop, and Vermont. And you will notice that those amounts exponentially increase. And so I want you to keep those numerical amounts in your minds as we go through this presentation. Now you'll also notice in the third section, just as Lynn had previously stated, those highlighted numbers that were shown on our last chart that detailed and signified the ages of our current primary facilities, as well as some of the renovations that were contributed to it. We also though want to point out the projected PI funds to spend in the next 5 years per square footage. Now, as a quick reminder, when we were looking at each of those schools, we noticed that Elm currently, to maintain the spaces that we have, the projected PI funds that we have for Elm currently is we are currently spending $12.62 per square foot. But over the next 5 years, that is going to jump to $55.93 per square footage. For Hilltop, we are currently spending $15.48 per square footage, and that will also increase to $36.49 per square footage in this projected PI funds over the next 5 years. Now, Vermont is in the process of getting new HVAC systems as well as roof repairs, so we have not necessarily had as much money spent on those PI funds currently. Vermont is currently spending about $4.70 per square footage because it's waiting for those additions and those renovations to be added to it. But Vermont's jumps an increasing amount to $58.36 per square footage for the projected PI funds in the next 5 years. Now, as Lynn had stated, when we were going through our process to figure out first and foremost what an optimal learning experience was for students, and then looking and analyzing our current primary facilities, we thought it was extremely important not only to look at the financial aspects that we had to consider, but we also wanted to really listen to the stakeholders and some of our top stakeholders in this conversation. Now, we wanted to look and see the people who are always in those current primary facilities. So we looked towards our students as well as the teachers who are there day in and day out with those students. And so we were able to send out an anonymous survey to our current primary faculty and staff to get their thoughts on their conditions within the schools. Now, our purpose to do this was to understand the current impact of the primary facilities on their job and the factors that we considered contributed to an optimal learning experience. So as you'll see, we have two graphs up on our board for us today, and they both signify two different overall concepts or aspects that we really want to look at and consider as a committee. Now you'll notice the first section focuses more on space, the first graph. The second graph focuses more on the basic functions of those current primary facilities. Now, before we even look at the graph, it's always important to look at the key to figure out what you're actually seeing here. So we want to draw your attention to the very bottom. If you squint, it might be a little bit easier to see, but draw your attention to the very bottom of our scale that we have. We had a rating scale that we sent out to the teachers in this anonymous survey, and we asked them to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. If a teacher gave a 1, it represented that, yes, I have this support, I feel good about it, and I can successfully utilize the support within my teaching to offer my students an optimal learning experience. If a teacher gave an answer of a 5, this represented, no, I do not have this support at all. Now, as we look at these two overall arching concepts of space and basic functions, I want to bring your attention to two very staggering details that we want to share. Now, the first one is on the first graph, first space, and you'll look at the very last section where it says accommodating pull-out needs. Now, 63%, 64% of our teachers stated that they do not have the room and space to accommodate pull-out needs for students. This could be students on IEPs or individualized education plans. It could be students in gifted and enrichment opportunities. It could also be students who are English language learners who need additional space to pull out and work. It could be students who just need a simple movement break within their day to help benefit and provide them the optimal learning experience needed. I also want to draw your attention to some of the information we received from our faculty and primary staff in regards to the basic functions of their current facilities. And so you'll notice here in our HVAC systems and functions, and if it functions optimally, 37% of the teachers who are currently within our primary facilities stated that their rooms are not climate controlled. The HVAC system is not working as optimally as they would like it to. One day it might be frigid, the other day it might be very warm, but really focusing on the emphasis to have that climate control within their classrooms to again offer their students that optimal learning experience. So in addition to reaching out to our stakeholders within our community, we also wanted to explore and took the liberty to look at other schools and surrounding schools and districts to see how they were offering their optimal learning experience for their youngest learners and students. And so we were very fortunate to work with the administrative team at Miami Whitewater Elementary and the Harrison School District to go and view their brand new facility constructed in August 2021. Now, we are very fortunate to walk around the school, and I want to draw your attention to a few simple differences that you might see. You'll notice in the first picture, there is an ample amount of space. And so one thing that they had a lot of, and they provided all their students with, was that optimal space for, again, supporting their optimal learning opportunities. You will also notice in the next two pictures, located at the bottom and the top right, you will notice that there's also lots of storage opportunities. They have ample storage for not only the teachers, but for the students. So they have a place that they can call home and they can feel comfortable to present themselves with this optimal learning experiences. Last but not least, my personal favorite on the far end, you will notice that there's lots of natural light and ability to see and progress and learn. And it's just a positive atmosphere for students to learn and engage with lots of natural lighting involved within the schools. Now, in regards to all this information we've been throwing at you today, it's clear that we are at a crossroads. And our community has a major decision to make regarding the future of our primary facilities. Now, before I go ahead and tell you these staggering numbers I will share with you in a moment, I want to share something very important with everyone. Now, you're probably wondering, if you're looking at this golden number saying, where does this information come from? What are you telling me first? And I want to make sure you realize where we got this information. Now, these estimates that I'm about to share with you come from the information provided by the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission based on projects that were completed in the past 4 years on average. Please note, though, that costs are rising in the last 4 years, so these are historical numbers and should not be used as actual information or data. It's just provided as comparative data for us to see today. So as we are looking at all of our options for the future of our primary facilities, we want to give you all the options that we've considered and looked at financially, as well as with indicating other factors as shared prior. First and foremost, we want to look at maintaining the current footprint. Now, when I say maintaining the current footprint, that means not changing anything. That means keeping our structures the same, keeping our space the same. That is not changing anything. It's just maintaining what we currently have, as Lynn showed you in the previous pictures. So we're maintaining our current footprint. That will cost our district $3.6 million. If we are looking to renovate all 3 existing buildings, our total cost projection is $26.3 million. To tear down and rebuild 3 schools, that total cost projection is $34 million. Consolidating into 2 schools, that total cost projection is around $24.8 million, but that's not including the land acquisition. So if you need more space to build a school and to provide that optimal learning opportunity, you would also have to consider that into the cost of that experience. If you consolidate into 1 school, that total cost projection would be $15.3 million. And again, that's not including that land acquisition. In addition, though, to these financial factors that we are sharing with you today, I also want you to consider some other really important information. And through our research and through our connections with other districts, we learned there's also a lot of high-level factors that should be considered and are very important to consider that impacts this entire opportunity for whatever option is chosen. First and foremost, we're going to look at the connectivity. So how does transportation play in to the needs of our community? How can all of our students access our schools in an easy and efficient way to help progress their learning? We also want to look at the cultural significance. And we want to look, is the building that we are working with historically or culturally significant? That's a very important factor, especially in a historical community like Wyoming, and something we really want to consider moving forward. In addition, you'll also notice the educational specifications. You want to think, is there a good fit between the desired educational curriculum and the building's current and proposed configuration? So do our structures help us provide that optimal learning opportunity or not? And how can we make them provide the most optimal learning opportunity for all of our young learners here at the primary? So as we summarize this information for you and this project for you, I want to bring your attention to our recommendations. Now, as you can see, we're at a crossroads, but with all the information we have gathered and we've shared, our committee believes that improvements need to be made in all of our primary facilities in order to provide all of our students with an optimal learning experience. We want to make sure we provide every single student and support their needs with what they need to have the most successful learning experience possible. In addition, though, we also think it's incredibly important to include stakeholders in the decision-making process, especially in a close-knit community like Wyoming. We want to make sure that everyone is able to share their opinion and share their support as we look at all the options and opportunities ahead of us regarding our current primary facilities. All right, and so that is the rest of our presentation. thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. And we're happy to take any questions you may have.
I've been waiting for that report for 20 years. Okay, questions? Anybody?
Okay,
have
sorry. I love it. Ilya and I are both also on facilities and CAC, so we have a lot of opportunity to engage you. So I'm kind of gonna see if you guys done first, I guess. Well, actually, my first one is just the notes. I said I'd wait, but I'm not. But you just I'm sorry, but I liked the addition of even more pictures because hearing it the first time often for all of us is when you are so integrated in it, what would be actually more helpful. So just to see some of those updates was helpful to see some more of that and the chart with the lonely X. I said, Lynn, I wasn't laughing at you. It was like just to see the visual. So,
Oh, it's depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, when your art teacher is on a cart, there's 20 minutes to set up and take down and what, 5 minutes of art then.
And I agree with like Lynn's perspective too, the kids being like in one space for a lot of the day. It's, you know, I was sort of curious. I don't know if the figure was like 3.6 million or back to that, just to like maintain the current footprint. Is that like for going forward, how?
That's probably a new roof.
Yes,
And that's about it.
so that's looking at the HVAC systems, that's looking at the new HVAC systems, roofing, that is just to keep the structures the way they currently are.
Probably help with that too.
Running.
When we think about our 5-year permanent improvement plan and maintaining the current footprint, there is no improvement there. So while we talk a lot about our permanent improvement dollars, there is no real improvement to the learning spaces. So with $3.6 million and nothing changes about the way we're serving our kids. It's about windows, it's about roofs, it's about HVAC. It's about just maintaining the infrastructure of the building. So there's no added storage. Those hallways aren't cleaned up. There's no added classrooms. I mean, it really is just if you think about that in terms of your home, you know, you have to do some sort of big ticket items on sort of the exterior of your home. You always have to worry about your roof and your windows and your furnace and your air conditioning, but you're not changing your living space at all. You're not improving your living space. And that's exactly what maintaining the current footprint is. So in order to get expanded learning spaces, improved learning spaces, they're just bigger projects for us because there are significant renovations involved.
Right.
And I think the pictures sort of tell the story about why that would be.
I was also curious about the renovate all 3 existing buildings. That's supposing that you can, or even the tear down and rebuild 3 schools, that on the current land, say at Hilltop, that is the hill, can that be done with the, like, you know, I'm just, that isn't for your committee. Committee phase 2, I don't know.
We give you a lot of options to look at.
Yeah,
It's like great options to look at as a school board.
And
That's
Hilltop,
a great question, and it really is.
Hilltop especially because a lot of people think, oh, there's a lot of land up there. Well, the city owns half that land and the city owns the flat part. We own the hill. I think the other thing you did quite well is I like the way that you made it quite clear that if it's a PI money, it has to go to something beyond supplies, but it has to be long lasting, but it can't be new build kind of material. So that we are gonna need to be very realistic here. We're looking at 11, a bottom line.
I was going to ask, first off, the recommendation, what does the committee think we should do?
No, I provide you with all the options.
That's phase 2.
Yes, so we are happy
next
to
year's
love to
goal.
hear and future conversations. So we are here just.
You didn't want to pick one.
Yeah.
So the members of the CAC who will be back next year, that'll be their project.
Oh, we want to keep them. Let them say their.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ilya.
Grow Ilya.
All right, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I missed the second half of the meeting when you all talked this at the CAC, so it was my first time experiencing it. I thought the visuals and all those things were very, very clear. I felt like I was clear what your point of view was as I was listening to the presentation. But my related questions, I was thinking through it and looking at the numbers. What would you say is the reason why we haven't done this already? Right? I mean, if we were to look at this, we would have imagined that generally what the cost would be and everything. Now, securing land or it being available and how you go do that, I do think that's a legitimate question, additional to what it would cost, right? But it seems kind of a bit of a no-brainer, but it's kind of not. And you mentioned the historical piece, et cetera. I guess one part of that question is, what's the reason why people in our community may not want to do this? Which I think is connected with why you don't want to tell us what the recommendation is. Why you don't want to tell us what we ought to do. So what's that point of perspective for somebody who's only been around in 10 years?
Do you need to go back to that one slide of middle school and high school?
Absolutely.
Because that answers part of the question.
I absolutely think so.
Historical factor.
There we go.
They can't see that very well.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, there have been a fair amount of renovations over the years. It's just in our district, you can't do everything you want all at one time. So you have to spread it out and you have to go for who needs the most help first.
Why did Vermont get renovated?
I guess the thing I was trying to get
Some
at,
of
I
those
didn't-
renovations, like, okay, this is how old I am. Some of these renovations, that's when we air conditioned the primary.
Yeah.
So those are big
But this
numbers
conversation
because
has
we
come up.
weren't air conditioned.
Right.
The
But I thought we
conversations
did some of those things because people were resistant to doing something other than continuing to renovate these older buildings. I thought there's this undercurrent in the community about, I want to either be able to walk my kid to school or some other thing that people have a concern about relative to going from 3 primary schools to 1 private school. So partly where I was just trying to get a sense for what's the qualitative dynamics or the things that may be concerns people have in the community, even though the numbers and all the other stuff would likely say you could probably educate your kids in really nice spaces if you had land available and chose to build one primary school.
I think the other piece that and then I'll let the committee answer your question, because I know they certainly want to give you a recommendation. The other piece that you said it in a couple different ways, but I just want to make sure that it's clear. We've talked a lot about the footprint of the building. I think the other piece that is an opportunity for us is that we have primary instruction maybe looking a little bit different in each of those buildings. So we have some opportunities to, collaborate in a different way, put grade levels to work together more. Just the way that we serve students could be optimized if our primary students were all together in one building like they are in the middle school. It looks different. Students are having different experiences because they're just sitting in 3 different, very physical spaces. And that's a challenge for us in a small district because because we're a small district. We have traveling teachers. We have to do things different, and we're a little more challenged, a little more pressured even on the instructional side, not just the facility side, because of the way that we sort of have to spread out primary learning. And so I know that you hinted around at that in a couple of different ways, but I don't want to lose track of the opportunity that we have to improve, optimize their experience. And I know Gina's looking to stand up and say something about that. I can just see her. That's a real opportunity for us, in addition to the physical pieces.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of piggyback on what Rhonda said, at the 3 primaries, the kids are not getting the same opportunities what was in that chart, just the art and music, for example. The kids at Hilltop are getting a different experience with having an art room to go to where they can paint. There's a place where they can put their papers to dry. They have, the teacher doesn't have the prep time in wheeling all the stuff and getting everything onto their cart to go into the room, having them do their activity, and then building in that time, taking out of instruction time to clean up, get everything loaded onto her cart or his cart, and then a drying cart, and then the drying cart gets wheeled into the hallway to then dry. And, maybe that's close to the front entrance and you're walking in and you're walking into a rack of all the lost and found coats and the salt and the shovels and everything else. And that kind of, affects the space and the feeling that you get when you go into a primary school. I also feel that the community as a whole, one of our staff members had a good point, and I thought this was important. You know, our buildings were built so long ago, and life looked so much differently than it does today, and education looked a lot different back in the 50s and 60s than it does today. And the use of technology and families and all kinds of different things are happening. And, you know, our kids are still learning in a space that they learned in when it was 1950, 1960. And so I think we have to be mindful of moving forward in forward thinking about how we're going to help our students to be best prepared to then go on up to the middle school and then go to the high school and then eventually go out into, you know, society. So.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. I'm very new to Wyoming, but my understanding is the narrative around this type of inquiry before we did it, when it came up before, is that it's a question of consolidating the schools or not consolidating the schools. And there's a lot of feeling and emotion around whether we should do that or not. And even when we started thinking about what's the value of community-based schools versus, and we quickly realized that's not the only option. And so part of the reason there's no recommendation is because we wanted to really highlight that there are all of these different options that need to be interrogated in detail so that people can really see the pros and cons of each of those. And you can sort of reset the narrative and make a more objective decision about the way forward. I think that's sort of the recommendation, right? Is to sort of reset the narrative and look at those different options and kind of interrogate those. So there's a phase 2 and a phase 3 possibly, but I think the idea that the decision is just consolidate or not, I think that is a barrier to progress in the community, from my understanding.
Well, that's very helpful for me. I actually wanted you to know, it wasn't like me saying, you guys got to drive a recommendation. The way CAC works is if you were to recommend a lead option out of 3, the board still has to look at, evaluate. So we understand. We weren't trying to put this on you, like, tell us what we can do so we can put your name and say, hey,
I want to hear the recommendation.
Throw them all down, build on that. I want to.
It was very clear to me that there was a recommendation, and I heard it loud and clear, like what the recommendation was, even though not stated. But
part of it, I mean, we really thought about this as this entire presentation as another piece of data to sort of like build momentum toward this cause. The reality is, like, now is the time. We need to do something. That was the main point. We can't do nothing. And let's get started seriously. I think that was
well. One thing I'd say to Tim, I know we will take what they have shared with us, and there's a process that
You're doing a great job.
Does going forward.
Sorry.
So one thing we just made. There's values saying these are the pros and the cons of each of them. And this team may be helpful to kind of frame out some of what we think those options are. But I think to get to some level of objectivity and helpful assessment, and I would include the qualitative perspectives, and I would include all the things that people have used or felt in the past was the reason why we wouldn't do this, in addition to the numbers and all the quantitative pieces, so that we can really just look at them on a page and then be able to use that assessment to share with the community why we're recommending whatever it is we ultimately recommend whenever we get to that point. Because I do think that look at the pros and cons of each of these will help people feel like we've been objective and inclusive of all the considerations as we get to whatever the recommendation ultimately is.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that's the intention, is to carry this work out. This is just the beginning. It's the passing of the baton to continue to identify what each one of these potential solutions looks like. And they've given the criteria to look at, and I think that's very helpful, and will drive future work.
Yeah, but I really hear what you're saying. This actually starts a conversation that is often stopped. I can remember during way back in 17, when I campaigned the first time for the board, one of the things I would hear out of gate would be, keep those neighborhood schools. The very first comment I had this time, when I kind of first went out and talked to somebody, and it was actually one of my contemporaries with kids who were graduating. I'm not sure of their investment in, other than they're citizens still, but they're like, keep those neighborhood schools. And I, like, when you, like, we need to start a conversation, maybe we will, but there are considerations about optimal learning and how learning has changed. And I think you've begun to lay out something that isn't polarizing. It's like, look at, here's some data. I don't know that we've done that. Like,
Right.
I've never seen this kind of, for the community, this kind of laying it out this way. And it's really interesting for the community to see it, you know, on finance and facilities, we are starting to hear those things. But sometimes when you don't know details, you do immediately are like, no, I don't want that.
Well, and it's also important to know when you're giving all of this, when it all ties into maintaining, you don't want to keep putting millions of dollars in. Like it is the time to be making some sort of decision. Like you were saying, it's important to not then put millions into new roof and new HVAC. And if you are going to either renovate or do something, I mean, it's only important to do that if you commit to they're all going to look the same, right? Really.
And as I think as we define each one of those solutions, it will be critical to clearly articulate what opportunities they each present to students and what opportunities they each maybe perhaps don't present to students, and to understand what those differences are, which will help guide that ultimate decision.
Is the state and federal money still available? Is that revolving?
The OFCC money
Yeah.
we're long on the list. But
Well,
I remember, if you take their money, you have to follow their rules.
and
Which
I
we've not
believe
usually
the
been fond
reason we
of.
chose not to was because they said you have to
Yeah,
do
okay.
primaries all together as one bill.
We went back and looked at the report, and they said you at least had to go to two.
What would have done, but 10 years ago, we turned them down. Okay. Yes, you have to do what they say.
Yeah.
Their bathrooms where they say, classrooms where they say.
Classroom sizes are very specific, yeah.
Well, excellent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. I think,
3 hours a year.
great stuff from the CAC. Thank you. Wow.
A lot of good info.
Lot of good info, and we thank you for coming, and if you'd like to sneak out the back door, feel free.
Thank you.
You've given us a lot, we appreciate it. And we have your numbers, so don't go too far. All right, now we're gonna hear from the math department. It's in my agenda as primary, middle, high, if that's how you'd like to do it, go for it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Hicks, the assistant principal of the 3 primary buildings. And this is my partner. So we've been talking about the 3 buildings and what we may possibly do with them in the future. We're going to look a little more direct about what we want to do now academically to keep the children growing inside those buildings. This year, I was given the task of doing a primary math book text adoption. And every few years, we reevaluate our curriculum to see, is it something that is still rigor enough for our children? Is it still going aligned with what we believe? Are the children growing in the direction we want them to grow? And is it what we as Wyoming think is what's best for our children? And so this year, we got an opportunity to examine several different math books and companies, such as Go Math, Bridges, iReady. It was 5 total that we ended up reviewing based on the team's decisions of what they felt that they wanted to look at. So we were looking at 3 main areas for focus, which Gina will share with you in a moment. The first on the left there, you'll see Envisions Mathematics. This is a series that we've been using currently. We adopted it several years back, and it had a lot of rigor. We felt that it was something that the children were being challenged, but we wanted to see if that's something we wanted to continue, or is that something that we wanted to see if there was something else out there that could maybe fit the needs better. And then to the right, the launch guided math. So what we're doing is, it's been the recommendation that we're going to continue forward with Envision Mathematics, which is currently what we have. It's a great series. The teachers are comfortable with it. Oftentimes when you adopt a new series, there's a learning curve for the teachers, and they just felt that what they were given to the children now was adequately working, and children were progressing nicely. The guided math to your right is a supplemental resource that will be added to the Envisions mathematics, and that will help differentiate a little more so than what the Envisions was offering. And so it's a supplement that will give all children the ability to keep growing no matter where they're at in their math abilities.
Can I ask a stupid question? I'm sorry. Are these actually books, textbook books, or is this all online?
So it's a mixture.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, depending on grades, depending on, they have different resources. So we have our manipulatives, but then we also have our online resources as well. And then we also have paper and pencil. So it can kind of get a mix of all for all children. And depending on what grade level, as you go from kindergarten to 4, depends on what kind of resources more so a child may use versus a different grade.
Got it, thank you.
You bet.
As we were looking at which resources, and kind of just want to give a little background of how we ended up with a core resource and a supplemental resource. What we found is that really to have this balanced math curriculum, there really isn't one magic bullet that just takes care of all of it and gives children everything that they need in order to be really successful in math, especially in the elementary grades. So this visual here just kind of shows a wooden stool. And if you imagine if you cut off one of the legs or had half of one of the legs missing, you wouldn't have a balanced stool to sit on. And so what we really kind of guided the math committee in looking at is 3 things. Does the math curriculum that we're looking at provide students with an opportunity to develop conceptual understanding? So that ability to be able to not just know how to do it, but know why it works and why that mathematical thinking is what it needs to be. Along with that, there's that procedural skill and fluency. So having efficient and accurate ways of solving problems. And then finally, application. Really understanding how to be able to apply the skills in real life when they're needed. And so what we found is that in any programs that we looked at, there were strengths and weaknesses in all of those areas. So really being able to provide resources for our teachers so that they can then curate the materials that their students need that are sitting in front of them based on all that data that we're collecting for them is really where the power is. Not handing them a resource and saying, follow this cover to cover, but saying, here are 2 really robust resources that we can use and pair with all of that data that we're collecting to be able to make those in the moment decisions for children is really what we think is going to be a powerful move forward.
This next one helped us as a committee make our decision on where we felt was going to be the best, what was going to be the best resource for our children. Working collaboratively with Mr. Weber and Dr. Whiteley and Gina, and we found this ed reports, and it breaks down each of the different math curriculums. This is a national website. It's an independent nonprofit site that reviews whether materials meet indicators and specific criteria, such as usability, standards, focus, rigor, and it breaks it down that the people who do this, the staffing, are made up of educators, data analysis, marketing, and policymakers. And then they collectively look at all of these things, and they break it down into these different areas. You can see kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are the ones we were focusing on. For example, if you look at the first one for kindergarten, 14 out of 14 standards for focus and coherency. Down below that, it's got 17, I think it was 17 out of 17.
That's 16 out of 18 and
16 out of 18.
4 to 17.
Okay. So 17 out of 18, they gave that one. And so we were able to look at the different resources that the committee wanted to look at and break it down into these different areas of rigor, usability, focus, and coherency to see, are these the areas that we feel that we need in our district? Certain curriculums could be great for, somewhere in Provo, Utah, but it's maybe not what we need here in Wyoming, Ohio. And so breaking it down, looking at the different resources, looking at the different criteria, standards, we felt that the Envision was still best to meet our children's needs.
If I can just interject here and say, when we looked and we created a spreadsheet where we broke down the ed reports rating in all of those areas for all of the different companies that we looked at, And Envisions was clearly the best choice. It was the only one of our options that was fully green across the board through ed reports.
It met all of our expectations.
Yeah.
All right, the 21st century skills. You know, it's kind of like when you're working on your lesson plans, your goal is to focus on where you want the students to be, and then you work backwards. So working backwards on conceptual understanding is where we want our children to be. We have problem-based learning. One of the things Envisions does is allows for real-world problem solving, and it makes it relevant to whether you're first grade or third grade or fourth grade. And it gives kids a way to manipulate the question, come up with a solution independently in some scenarios, but also in small group or even as a class, so they can work collectively together to solve a problem. It also has an array of different visual learning. So we're talking manipulative, we're talking online data, we're talking some of the things that when you see a child get on, it looks like a video game, but they're actually learning from it. It's amazing, and the kids are so engaged. And that's one of the things Envisions also gives us.
So I want to talk to you a little bit more about just how we would incorporate both of these resources into really a kind of a reimagined math classroom structure, really utilizing a classroom structure known as Math Workshop. And really the way Math Workshop works is it is built around differentiation. So recognizing that in any classroom, you might have a first grader that is still working on counting over 20, and you might have a first grader that's multiplying and dividing. And that is a very clear reality in our classrooms right here in Wyoming. And what we know is that there isn't a one size fits all lesson that's going to really give every child what they need and then translate into growth for our students. And so we've really been looking at the primary at how do we put a math workshop structure in place. And the way that that would work is it would start there in the green with a really short period of time with some sort of warm up activity. It's usually some sort of real world concept that is applicable in math. It follows into a whole group teaching point that the teacher would have that would be applicable to every student in the classroom, typically an on grade level standard that's being really explicitly taught to the whole class. But if you look at that, more than half of the time in a math workshop lesson is where teachers are actually working with students in small group instruction, giving them really targeted data-driven instruction around what they need. Thinking back to that CAC study when Ashley was showing you some of the data that we have based on standards, that data totally drives what teachers are doing during that small group time. Right? So really growing them from where they are and looking at what standards they need and growing them from there. At that same time, though, we have other students that are deeply engaged in actual work related to transfer of what they've been learning. And so then if we wrap up and the very end of it just brings the whole class back together to do some sort of reflection of their learning and a share out. And the combination of Envisions and guided math provides our teachers with the materials they need to get that done. So we're really excited about the opportunity there. Just some extras with guided math. We would have manipulative kits for hands-on learning that correspond to all of the lessons that are there. We have opportunities for computer-based assessments that give our teachers and our students immediate feedback. So you don't have to wait for the teacher to grade your paper and hand it back a couple of days later. You're getting real-time, in-the-moment information back about how you're doing. And in turn, your teacher has that information and is then able to act on that. And then finally, it's really great professional development for teachers, really supporting them in classroom structures that promote personalized instruction for our kids, which at the end of the day is what we know gets great growth for kids. So that's it. Do you have any questions?
Very cool. This is just so informative, the whole night. It's just so great to see how education is evolving, and I'm starting to realize, boy, my kids are getting older because things are really changing. But I'm just really thinking too about, like, when you think about, I wonder if we'll start seeing some of these new ways of teaching, if we'll see that kids report that they enjoy math more, or as girls will say, I'm a math, they're getting that self-correction. Girls say, I'm a math person early on.
Yes.
You know,
I would love for you to come and just walk around with me sometime and see what's happening in our math classrooms. Our kids are so engaged. They are learning at such high levels. They love it. I was in a 4th grade classroom the other day, and it was the end of math time, and the kids were like groaning because they had to stop. It feels like important work. They're so engaged, and it's because there's context around it.
Right.
And it's right for them. So every child's being they're being challenged at an appropriate level.
And that not the whole time is spent with the teacher in front of the whole class.
Yes.
So it just, that I think is changing things for kids too.
Absolutely.
And that'd be interesting to do more math workshop structure and then to see what you all notice, like, I don't know, as they're moving up to middle school.
Right.
And I got distracted by our strong, like, female math section over here too, of, like, female math teachers. Join
Yes.
that. Right. Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job.
All right, thank you.
So that's a good question.
Gina,
We
I
will
do-
have
okay,
those,
thanks.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I know we've looked through the book sometimes for all of you, like, they are back there. Oh.
More of a request based on Kara's comment. I experienced this phenomenon. In 1992, I was in college in engineering, and we had Society of Women Engineers that was built because there was this idea that girls were different in math than boys, and all this other craziness. But I understand this phenomenon around kids as early as elementary saying, I'm not a math person. And I get there's different levels of interest and passion, what have you. One of the things I'm wondering about is how the books that we use and the way we engage and the context we give, also the way that we teach and how we help them understand what math is, keeps kids from, in their mind, getting to a conclusion by 4th grade that I'm not a math person. The thought I have about it is in math, you're always learning something you don't already know. And so you're always bumping up against the piece that isn't known. And so it isn't about what you already know as much as how you learn the things you don't know. And so one of the questions for me that you don't even have to answer, I just wonder how we can culture-wise, communication-wise, and language-wise help address some of the preconceived or premature conclusions for some child in elementary that they're not a math person. It just breaks my heart when people make a conclusion like that because I think it's incomplete and premature.
I would love to just respond to that just really briefly and say that I do think we are working so hard to do that. And I think that begins at the primary with establishing that growth mindset for kids and helping them realize that it's okay to not know everything right away. And then it's even okay not to know something after your teacher's taught it a couple of times. But really it's that you hang in there and you keep working at it and you keep growing and you're a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And I think one of the ways we do that is by challenging kids at an appropriate level and being willing and having teachers that have the resources to be able to meet kids where they are rather than saying, this is the next page of the textbook, ready or not, here we go. We have to be able to give them the thing that's just right.
And I was gonna say, I think the committee members found that it's not a one shop all. And by using the guided math as a supplement, it'll help reach some of those children who are still struggling and help give them the confidence they need to keep progressing at their pace.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie O'Hara. I'm the middle school math department chair.
And I'm Beth Smith,
6th and 7th grade math teacher.
What am I teaching right now?
What am I teaching? What am I teaching? Not sure. I don't know what I'm teaching. Unlike the elementary, we have decided to transition to a new series for math. One, we have consumable math books right now, so we literally have no math books to pass out. So we either need to renew or decide to get something new. And B, we're trying to transition a little bit more into that mathematical thinking, and we're looking for resources that help us do that. So we have decided, because of our unique opportunities at the middle school, to also adopt 2 different sets. So at
the middle school, we have some tracking where kids are in different levels as they move throughout. And some kids are actually learning high school level math in the middle school before they make it to the high school. One of the weaknesses of our current program is that our 5th grade has different materials, a different website. A lot of programs are 6 through 8 for middle school. They're not 5 through 8. So one of the reasons why we chose big ideas and modeling real life is because it is coherent throughout 5th through 8th. And so the majority of our students would be in that textbook. And it flows very nicely with similar materials. The classes that are high school courses, or the class that prepares them for that, would be then in EdGems, which differentiates a little bit with rigor, as well as accessibility, which we'll kind of get into as we progress. We basically looked at these 5 ideals as we were deciding, which textbook series we wanted to go with, or if we wanted to do a whole new curriculum, or what aligned the best. And so the first thing we looked at was the actual alignment. Do you want to talk about big ideas?
Sure. So we looked at our alignment to standards. So the big ideas, as we said before, goes through 5th through 8th grade. Its big focus is the low floor, high ceiling. When we're talking about, our 5th through 8th graders, we have in our, especially our first 2 levels of groupings of kids, children who struggle greatly and children who are working above grade level, and trying to meet those mixed needs within classrooms is one of the good things that Big Idea really addresses. It also does a nice balance of both discovery and direct instruction. Discovery is great, but we also have kind of in the real world a time limit. There's not time for them to discover all the standards on their own. We have to do direct teaching. But it involves both things very nicely to allow kids to discover and grow, but also provide that direct instruction that many students need. It also has a great deal of additional resources that allows you to change the pace and rigor, and lots of extra level practice. There's a lot of hidden leveling in Big Ideas where students don't know that they are getting practice at the level that they need, but they can do that, and then that feeling of success and that I can do things and I can do my work can be built right into their work that we liked a lot.
Starting in 7th grade in the middle school, there is a path where students could take pre-algebra and take algebra as 8th graders. Some students also double up and then take geometry as 8th graders. The majority of programs that we looked at, including our current, take the 7th grade textbook, the 8th grade textbook, shove it into one textbook and call it 7th grade accelerated, which is difficult as a teacher to maneuver the resources that were already given to you and then recreate your own from there, because you need to truly marry the two. What's good from 7th grade that I can also pull from 8th grade and teach at the same time. This EdGems was actually created through teachers, by teachers, and it actually takes all of those standards and it pulls out the equation ones from both and makes them a totally new unit from that, instead of just shoving 2 textbooks together. In fact, it was the only one we saw out of the 7 we looked at that really thought about how we were going to teach accelerated students and not just shove more content at them. We also feel like it's more rigorous, so it has a higher ceiling, but has a lot of resources to help scaffold if students aren't ready for that at the moment. But the big thing that we really liked was it has a lot of digital resources, including rich problem solving tasks, performance tasks, real life problems for them to look at, that we could also transition into the classes that are not with that textbook. It has a lot more of taking abstract, which is what happens when you get to higher level math, and making it more real, accessible for the kids into the real world scenarios.
We really like the Big Ideas philosophy, using the 5 highest impact teaching strategies. The idea of, yes, you have direct instruction, because you can see here, they're like a 3.5, no, they're teaching. But then also the importance of feedback and the space practice, teacher clarity, which is information for the teachers as to how they're presenting the information or how they should be instructing or what should I be looking for, which we all like to think we know, but in a lesson that, to be able to look at and say, okay, this is really something I should be keying in on. And also a whole classroom discussion piece, getting the children more involved in what they're doing during the class, that putting those pieces together really show that it has the best impact for excelling students from whatever level they're at.
We also looked at 21st century skills, but not specifically just technology. So we feel like it does have a good digital piece, which is what we're missing with the Go Math. but it really works on the topics on the right, which is it really has them look at problem solving, reasoning and collaborating with others, specifically justification, so explaining why they're doing something, why that works, why they can move on to the next step, as well as the digital piece that a lot of them have now because of COVID. And then both textbooks we looked at had a 3-tiered system, apparently again only to teachers, so that we could level students and give them their just right level without it being labeled like A, B, or C. So everything looks the same when you're assigning it. The homework looks like 4.1 online or whatever it is you're doing, but the kids might be doing something different depending on what level that they're ready for.
That's interesting.
And then lastly, we're just going to go back to why we chose 2 different textbooks. We are also currently looking at how we track. Do we like the way we track? Do we want to continue to put kids where they're at? We feel like big ideas is so widespread that no matter what our choice is with that, that it really allows for us to hit kids where they're at, and it would allow us to make changes within our system if we choose to do that. Or we can keep where we're at, and it would still be a wonderful resource for us. We also really want to continue working on growing them as mathematical thinkers, and we feel like both of these textbooks really push that as their #1 agenda. And then specifically the path to high school, we really think that that needs to be different because of the rigor and because it's really laid out for them to combine those standards and not just differentiating by adding more standards to their plate. So really trying to combine the things that can be combined at a higher level with that the mathematical mindset that we're looking for. Any questions?
I was gonna say, I love the one that EdGens is created from teachers, like through and by teachers. I just feel like maybe that's starting to happen more, but historically.
I think there's a whole lot more materials now created by teachers. So like, we can't find what we need set up the way we need it. Why on earth isn't there a program to accelerate children who has looked at the standards and combined it? It seems insane that everybody else is literally gluing 2 books together and saying, there's your acceleration.
Right.
Well, okay.
And that it's only apparent to you all. I like that got integrated because kids do know that they're tracked and tends to help or hurt them. So, and living with 2 middle school math people right now in January, just knowing what that looks like can be lovely. And so, good job. It's interesting.
I'm just interested, does this in any way, doesn't sound like it changes, at least for now, the tracking that we're currently doing?
We are starting that conversation. We've actually started talking a little bit about it, but that's our goal for next year, is to look at that. Do we like the system that we're in? Which is why when we were choosing the textbook, we wanted to make sure that we fit our current system and what we think possibly could be a system that we move into, so that we would not have to say next year, we need new textbooks because we changed our mind or whatever that is.
Great. And I think the other piece is also the fact that these are textbooks. These aren't, the 5th grade is consumable. It's really developmentally appropriate. It's the way it works and functions. The rest of them are hardbound textbooks, so they're not going to disappear. If we continue, hopefully we will continue to like them, and so we'll continue to have that as a resource that our parents really want. Our parents really want and like to be able to support their students by having, where's the book? I would like the book. I want to look at the book. I don't understand your math. I don't know what you're teaching. Can I see the book? So I think it helps make that connection between us and the parents for communication purposes as to what's going on.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
I know. It's really
I feel like I've seen continuity too. We don't always.
Yeah, there's a definite alignment, right?
To each other. All right.
Did you guys have any questions?
Oh, the guys.
You guys good?
They're good.
Okay.
They're good. All right, high school.
I know. Just the same.
I'm Veronica Robinson, math teacher in the department here at high school. And I'm Amy Malloy, math teacher at high school.
No one told us how to use this.
Oh. I like your honesty.
Okay, great. Okay, so we they just put it there. So I'm gonna aim and push a button button and see what happens. And there's nothing.
Push the right.
I'm hitting the right, right there.
That's all right, I'll do it for you. I'll call it.
So we are adopting a new AP statistics textbook. I don't know if you know this, but at the high school, we have not used a physical textbook with any of our courses, with the exception of our AP statistics book for a number of years. And the reason is because we have not been able to find a single textbook that will meet every need that we need to meet for all of our kids. Our teachers at the high school have been robbing Peter to pay Paul to find things that will fit each of our kids, that will differentiate appropriately for all of our kids, that are user friendly for all of our kids, that our kids will understand, that our kids are willing to carry, because our kids don't want to carry the textbooks around. Our kids are really tech savvy and they know how to maneuver the internet really well. They know how to find internet resources and internet support. And so we at the high school have decided to embrace that and to try to pull that into the classroom as much as possible. Our teachers have basically generated their own courses by pulling materials from various textbooks and giving students guided notes. We post to Canvas using those notes. We post our assignments to Canvas as well. Teachers generate the assignments by pulling problems, not only from previous textbooks, but also from online resources. So we don't actually give a physical textbook for any other course with the exception of AP Statistics. Now, for the record, we do have some physical textbooks in our textbook closet at the high school. And I have had parents in the past who've asked, hey, do you have a textbook for honors geometry or for plain and solid geometry, which is now advanced geometry? And if they want a copy of one, I can supply one. But we don't issue one to the kids because they take it, they put it in the locker, they take it home, put it on the bed, and they bring it back at the end of the year. So we have found that it's just I am not even kidding you. Someone even put it in the cage with their ferret. So I decided that we're just not gonna spend district money on textbooks. We are going to just dig in and create resources, which is what we've been doing. So that is why this is the only book we are presenting to you tonight. Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna push another button.
Well,
she's not even gonna let me try.
Oh, really? You did it.
What about the learning curve?
I'm
Learners?
I'm just trying to scaffold. I'm sorry. I'll let you do the next one.
You just say click.
You go right ahead.
Sorry, I'm shivering. I'm
I know.
It's-
Talk about HVAC systems. It's really
Our room is
freezing.
just like your classroom. Hot, cold.
You get
Every
two
5
choices,
minutes.
very hot or very cold.
Yes.
That's all you get.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the AP statistics book. This is, I sort of spearhead this course. So we're up for renewal. I do feel like statistics is a different animal in the world of math in the sense that it's not, you know, it's sort of like math and English got together and made a baby, is what I always tell my students. But
I didn't know that.
Yep, right.
That's great.
I have learned so much tonight.
We should order a business course. Keep them.
Okay. It's been slow.
Yep. So yeah, the statistics companies though, they do a nice job putting together our textbooks. There aren't very many to choose from. There were only 3 that are actually approved from College Board. So those were the 3 that I and Mrs. Johnson explored. The one that we are getting is actually just a more current edition of the one that we currently use. So all topics from AP statistics are covered. We like that it includes pages that teach how to do statistical analysis using the TI-84 graphing calculator, which is the approved calculator of choice in this course. But most importantly, we really teach students how to read a college level textbook.
because this is a college level course. And that's one of the main reasons we liked this one is for its readability. So that's an important skill. No, you click the button. Oh, you're coming out.
Don't give up so soon.
All right.
Do it.
Alignment to standards, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like I was just saying in the previous slide, you know, College Board has only approved 3 different textbooks to meet their AP curriculum, so that's the alignment to the standards. 21st century skills, we use the TI-84 graphic calculator and as well as computer software outputs for any statistical analysis that we do. As far as differentiation is concerned, there are problem sets with various levels of difficulty. We like that throughout the pages of each chapter, there's scaffolding of the problems as well as extensions of the problems for any learners who want to go beyond what we do in the classroom. And then included with it is an extra of My Math Lab for school. So we've never tried that before. It's new to us, but well, it comes free with the book, so we're going to take a look at it and possibly give it a shot.
We like free. And it worked twice.
Good job.
See.
Any questions for us?
No, I think that was just interesting. Thank you for the background on just the high school classes and how that's different for,
Absolutely.
for my knowledge too.
How does this work when you get a new math teacher?
Oh, it actually works out really well because we're very collaborative in our department. I mean, we don't leave anyone hanging and we don't let anyone sit out in an island. We like to have binders. We're so old school, it's ridiculous. So we keep all of our materials in paper form and electronic form, as well as we have all of the textbooks that we use as resources as well. And so when someone new comes on board, they typically bring with them resources from where they were previously teaching at. Like Robin, she came with stuff. And then we share with her the curriculum for what we're teaching. And if she's coming from Ohio, which she did, she's teaching the current standards.
Right.
So it's really not going to be anything super brand new that she needs. It's just like some subtle little Wyoming nuances that she would need to follow, like make sure you keep people informed and, you know, leave your stun gun locked in your desk, you know, those kinds of things. We really want to make sure we keep those on the DL, but outside of that, you know, just what I was kidding.
I'm looking at everyone's faces if I'm laughing.
I'm already on probation. I guess we'll just go for it. So, but yeah, what we do is with the new teacher, we just basically just make sure that they have everything that they need and we don't leave them hanging.
All right.
And I'll, you know, connect to with the work of the curriculum maps. And the work on the curriculum maps is designed to address that too, so that we have a starting place for how to organize those standards that's unique to Wyoming. And so it's really, you know, capitalize on the teachers and the team's knowledge of those standards and where to begin, so that when new people do come in, they do have a starting point, and they can act as the artist to utilize those resources.
Sounds great. All right, thank you. Gentlemen, I think they're fine. All right.
You good?
I don't know.
Thank you, ladies.
All right. The next thing on our list is to talk about our strategic plan. We are having worked on this for the entire school year. We are getting close to that time of bringing it out to the community and to the staff and following through on what it says. So, Mr. Weber, would you
Yes.
like to talk about the strategic plan?
I cannot compete with these folks, so I'm gonna stay right here, and this is a little bit more of a discussion, but I'll share, yes. We're gonna bring the temperature down just a little bit.
Somebody tinkered with it.
Every time somebody
I know.
They go it's so
Yeah, I was
extreme.
very comfortable.
I was too, until the last 2
I
minutes.
was, if you could bring that down.
Sure, I was freezing. for
About
most of
20
it.
degrees, please,
Okay.
sometime. Yeah. That went up very quickly.
Yeah, and we'll be cold here in
In
2
2
minutes too, but that's okay.
That's fine. I did feel bad for others, so I was very comfortable.
I'm
nice and warm. I'm nice and warm. I was shivering first. so it's
That
fine.
knows, I'm not touching it now, are you?
I took on the heat. Don't You're like, I didn't do it.
All right.
And now we all fall asleep. So I have a student in AP stats right now. This is a boy, and she loves it. She's now figured she's a math person, and I'd never heard that. Just math and English got together and had a baby. I'm like, I get it now. I know why she likes statistics.
Oh, that's funny.
I love it.
That's funny. All right.
Terrific.
Well, Heather's going to be right back. We'll go ahead and get started. And this is really just an update on where we are in the strategic planning process. And I'm very excited about this work because a strategic plan really sets the stage for student success and how we can help support student success now and in the future, and how we can build a flexible school district that can change in changing times. And we know what life looks like right now is very different from what life will look like in 5 years, 10 years, especially 15 years down the road. So incredibly important to walk through this process with our staff and with our community. So I will provide just a brief overview, share where we are in the process right now, discuss what our next steps are going to be, and then ultimately, I think it's important to know that we're still in the midst of the process right now. And we are working through this, and anyone who's part of that process, please join in if there are things you'd like to add in this conversation. And I think, all right. So really, the process began a few years ago, and really in 1920, we started talking more and more about a strategic plan. And it
took
did I say 1920? 2019 and 2020.
I was not here then.
This is.
I like to just
I lost
That's-
our presentation of the last presentation of the night.
That's how good. That's how good this plan is going to be. When you're talking 100 years, it's a long process. No, it began in 2019, 2020, as we were having community conversations, and we really were talking about with our community, with our staff, and even with students, what's working and what are the strengths of Wyoming City Schools, and where are those opportunities to improve. And then this whole idea of how can we best support students now and in the future. And so with those conversations, our CAC, which you've heard studies tonight, embarked on a strategic planning study, and they looked at best practices to support the strategic planning process. And from that, then one of the recommendations was to partner. Well, they recommended that yes, we do believe that it's time to engage in a strategic planning process. And they said what we think you ought to do, based on the success of other school districts, is to partner with Hamilton County Educational Service Center. And so that's what we did to begin this process. And one of the first steps was to create a design team. And within that team, we reached out to Wyoming residents who have children in the schools, in the primary, the middle school, and the high schools, and also residents that don't have children in the schools, to get a diverse thought process moving. Also, staff members are included from all of our different building levels. And we work with Hamilton County to identify different engagement opportunities. And those engagement opportunities included surveys and focus groups. And again, we're still in the midst of that process, so we'll continue to reach out for feedback from our community and our staff. One of the other components that is part of the strategic plan, or will be part of the strategic plan, is this whole idea of Wyoming attributes of a learner. And some people have spoken about this as a portrait of a graduate. We really have leaned on attributes of a learner because it's not just about high school students. It's the traits that we're trying to really create in our learners throughout our K-12 system. And as our building teams were talking about textbooks, I could think of some of these attributes really popping out in what they're trying to create. And so these attributes: critical and creative thinking, or thinkers, engaged learners, commitment to character, resilient, communicates and collaborates effectively, and the whole idea of empathy. And so these these ideas really stood out with our department chairs, and our department chairs pulled together to create these attributes of a learner. And again, this is still in process right now, but these are the themes that have risen to the surface on this idea of attributes of a learner. So you'll see these weaved into the strategic plan in some way, shape, or form in the language. So throughout this process, the design team has looked at feedback from our surveys, feedback from our focus groups, and through the analysis of that feedback, we have seen 5 core areas or pillars, if you will, rise to the surface that are most important to build the foundation for our strategic plan. And so you can see these are culture and climate, and building a positive school culture where students, staff, and families feel valued, connected, and a true sense of belonging. Communication partnership, where communication structures are built that strengthen the partnership with our students, our families, and our community members, that whole idea of partnership. Financial stewardship, where we are proactively managing our resources to optimize the student experience, is all connected to the student experience in obviously a fiscally responsible way. And social and emotional well-being, where we are utilizing innovative strategies for continued growth in mindset and culture, resulting in the overall idea of well-being for students, staff, and families. And so social and emotional well-being, or social and emotional learning, really was new to what we currently have in our district goals. And again, this comes from feedback from our staff members, our students, and our community. And then in the center, we have teach and learning, and the commitment to providing learning opportunities that personalize instruction and create lifelong learners, create that excitement that you've heard talked about in all of these presentations. The structure of how these are positioned matters. And so our core business is teaching and learning. And so you can see teaching and learning is surrounded by these other 4 pillars that really help to support students and create this incredible environment where students can ultimately learn as much as possible and feel happy, successful, academically, socially, and emotionally. If you have any questions, feel free to stop. Okay, yeah. And again, we're in the middle of the work, and so that's what resonates right now to the team, to the group. Again, here are those 5 core pillars that represent the core of our plan right now. And I would say these pillars really articulate the focus for the work in the future. And really they help to define or guide the work of the school district. In our strategic plan, these pillars are not intended to create actions. They're more so intended to create the filter by which we all look through, or create the vision for the future of our work. And so ultimately, our task will be to create goals and actions every year as a school district. And those goals and actions should be held together by something, and that's this anchor. So really we use the word anchor all the time. So this is the anchor by which we will connect to every single year. And so after those pillars were developed, our design team split up into groups, and we wanted to better define what each one of those pillars was intended to mean, to share, to advocate for in future work here in the district. And so I'm just going to take a moment to share each one of these. So if you look at teaching and learning, you can see what was defined in our work. And again, through the lens of feedback from our community and our staff, it's about embedding innovative practices in curriculum design, instructional strategies, and assessment practices, truly connected to the textbook presentations that you just saw. Active and engaging learning experiences and environments for students. So what are students actually doing in the classroom? Inspiring creative and critical thinking, communication and collaboration. So how are students working together? How are they working with their teachers? How are they communicating within the world? And then promoting this growth mindset in all aspects of teaching, learning, and professional development. Growth, we talked about the importance of growth, and we talked about that through the lens of a teacher and through the lens of a student, also connected to many of the things that you heard tonight.
also that like collaboration idea, like how much of this work is faculty, like going back to the faculty and asking them about the buildings and collaborating on the grading and the standards-based practices and like, you know, I felt like all of my questions could be answered because they had collaborated in coming up with their recommendations. And I just love seeing all of that happening in our district. I feel like that's maybe more than I've seen in the past.
Sure, and a true alignment too, as those things happen. So as you see teaching and learning more clearly defined, as we identify goals and actions, again, it's through this lens that we've got to commit to and be aligned across all of kindergarten through 12th grade. In climate and culture, we've defined this as aligning students, staff, and families around a commitment to character. And that's really through common beliefs, behaviors, and desired outcomes. And so we know we have to have conversations about what do we believe, and based on our beliefs, what are the behaviors that we would expect to see? And if we're aligned in our behaviors, what are the outcomes that our students will experience? And that alignment is critical to creating a positive climbing culture. Second bullet, embedding inclusive practices to create safe environments for all students, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, gender identification, sexual orientation, ability, everything. And so how do we make sure that kids feel good? They feel valued, connected, and that whole sense of belonging. The third bullet, value student, teacher, family, and community relationships. And that's student to student, student to teacher, student to community, teacher to teacher, teacher to community, all across the board. How do we create relationships throughout our district that ultimately create partnerships? And then lastly, you see recognizing the positive contributions of all team members. That's really important. And so we try to be intentional to celebrate the great things that are happening. And as these things continue to grow and grow, we need to make sure that we're doing that. Communication, collaboration, creating innovative communication structures that build a shared vision. Again, always working toward alignment. Also communicating progress and celebrating those accomplishments of our students and staff. And that's at a district building and a classroom level. Aligning communication tools to create a common K-12 experience for families and our school community. We want to make sure that as our students grow from kindergarten all the way through the time at which they graduate, there's rhyme and reason to how we're communicating and connecting with families. Highlighting the importance of feedback and the role student, staff, and community experience and voice plays in aligning goals and lived experiences. And so we can learn a lot from students, we learn a lot from families, we learn a lot from one another. And so we just need to pause and ask what's going well, what's not, and what do we do about it in all areas. And then the last bullet, provide accessible, inclusive, and timely communication to all stakeholders. How do we make sure that people have the right information, again, to increase the opportunity to partner with us? We talked about social emotional well-being, really about cultivating prevention and intervention systems for the purpose of building resilience and empathy. You can see some of those attributes of a learner popping in here. While supporting student, staff, social and emotional well-being. That has come through very, very loudly in our strategic planning conversations. Secondly, strengthen family, school, community partnerships for the purpose of promoting well-being, resulting in growth for students, academic, social, and emotional growth. And then the whole idea of delivering and maintaining a professional development plan for the purpose of continuous growth or continual improvement within prevention and intervention systems of support, and really helping our staff, providing our staff with the necessary skill sets to make a difference for kids and to support our students. And then lastly, financial stewardship, which is another idea that really wraps itself around all of our strategic plan. And you can see allocating resources wisely to create the best possible return on investment to our taxpayers. And so we've had those intentional conversations about how do these funds get utilized in a way that ultimately bring about student success. And everything is tied to student success, and it needs to be. And so secondly, you can see strategically going about decision-making for personnel, instructional materials and facilities, all with the mindset of what does it mean for students, acknowledging responsibility, securing, distribute resources equitably and sustainably, and thinking about the conversation we had about 3 primary schools and how do we focus financially through that lens and make sure that we're equitable across all of our buildings. And then this culture of transparency, accountability, and sustainability. I think that's really what the CAC study on our primary facilities is all about. Transparently going through that process to create possible solutions and then work with our community to identify what those solutions are. So again, this is where our design team is right now. And again, these are the 5 pillars that have surfaced as the areas where we think we need to be intentional to make decisions that support students. We are, again, continuing to work through the process. The hope is to have a strategic plan to begin the year next year. And we'll obviously communicate that with our students, our staff, and our families. But it's great work. The team is working incredibly hard, but it's exciting.
A lot of work. I mean, I know I'm not on it, so just to see all that work that you all put into it and the iterations of it. And I just even wrote, I love that we've integrated some more proactive language in that. Of course, will help kids when, and students and teachers if something already exists, but how can we help social emotional well-being? In that addition, you had hopefully preventative measures for some things too. I like to see that.
I like attributes of a learner, much more than portrait of a graduate, which I think we've seen a lot of schools do. But I like just that hint of like, you're gonna hopefully be a lifelong learner, and we've embedded that throughout as well. So I like that a lot.
I like that too.
And powerful to take the ways you can talk with students at the kindergarten level and at a high school level about the same attribute. But what it means differently to students is pretty powerful.
Do our teachers help you with the color scheme?
Let's know that.
Mrs.
Susie's
That's what
creation right now.
Mrs. Henke would work.
That's right. That's right.
She did it.
Yep.
It looks great. Thank you for that.
Anything that
Anyone else?
Well, there's a lot of conversation that found its way into those final products there, and a couple of different conversations in different groups too. I mean, the strategic plan design team divided up into groups, but there's also input there from the attributes of the learner group as well. So there are a number of people who put some input into that.
And
All
so,
right, thank you.
and next steps for us will be to share this. We'll share this electronically. We'll let everyone know that this is a point in a journey where we are right now, but let people know where we are and give an opportunity for additional feedback on where we are right now.
What's your, I mean, I know you said you want to roll it out for next year, so then do you have an end, like what's your end of feedback?
Early
time, I
summer.
guess? So that,
In the next 4 to 6 weeks, and the feedback time, and then we'll hoping to finalize it early summer.
So the goals can incorporate.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's
And
enough-
we've
As
worked,
early as next year.
we've worked with administrators and our department chairs to identify goals, knowing that there could be some adjustments based on the strategic plan.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you. We will move on to the board committee reports. 9:30. The finance committee has nothing to report. Bye.
Because schedule our meeting for next Monday.
Correct.
May
Thank
2nd
you.
at 4 o'clock.
All right. Citizens Advisory is working on a final timeline, which you shared with us. Thank you. And
And then
including
we
a
can say
final
that-
meeting and. I
Yeah,
guess
we're gonna
that-
say that final meeting change, so it could be
May
more of a
4th.
celebration,
Yep.
since we weren't able to do that in the beginning, so that date and time have changed, and that you all were included in that as well.
Right.
For all their hard work.
What is the
Doing that.
timeline?
May 4th at 6:30.
6:30.
The start.
The meeting
The
is at
start.
6:30, and then that will conclude, the CAC meeting time will conclude at 7.
What time do you want the board people?
7. Yeah, and just a shout out to the CAC teams. Their work has been
absolutely.
phenomenal.
Their work.
Phenomenal. And we think about the value that they bring to our school district and helping us think through future decisions. Every year, it's incredibly powerful, and this year is a perfect example of.
Thanks for
what they bring.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Superintendent committee liaison reports, the belonging committee.
Yes, we had, our superintendent's belonging committee met recently, and we were talking about the, final May meeting, just getting, plans set for the final May meeting, talking about membership, and transitioning into next year, discussing our application process and really creating structures for the 22-23 school year, 2022-2023 school year, as we continue our work with the BIC. The BIC team, Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative team, also met on Tuesday, April 12th. And the teams were continuing to work within their studies. They're preparing for a final May update for the entire Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative. And so they're continuing on their work. And we also reviewed some potential legislation in Ohio that impacts schools. And so we're reviewing that and seeing what the potential impacts are for us. We're going to continue that work.
And a quick rewind, you just reminded me for CAC, it's the same, just that we had just a separate planning meeting, so that since it is over as well for our final meeting in May, that we'd be gathering, that people know that there's always an application on a website, but really like what will really push out, what we'd like to do is talk to the members at the May meeting as well, so that we know that there's going to be places to fill. And how that looks, and that we would be looking at doing that in August. Right, good.
Yep.
So,
All right, thank you. Community engagement, anyone want to report in?
things on there.
Go for it.
Not necessarily that I was able to attend, but the Wheelathon was back and they changed locations and did it up to 6th grade, and we weren't able to attend, but I know a lot of people who did, and so that was a great turnout. Todd.
Perfect day.
So, yeah, May Fate is coming back for PSA on the 20th. I know they're looking for volunteers as always, right? So that people could get on their page for that. And the school foundation is having the poker hunt on April 30th from 1 to 4. That looks like a family-friendly event that you could people could go to. And we were saying there's a Beyond the Bar is using Pendery. There's a ton of Wyoming students who are in Sleeping Beauty at Pendery this weekend for 4 different shows. So those are some community ones that I know of.
I want to give a shout out to all the volunteers, the staff, kids, everybody that put on the prom this past weekend. I have not heard anything but positive. The kids had a blast. It was just so well organized, and really appreciate. I know Tim and Tanya were there, and James was there, and lots of staff. And so you guys probably saw the kids having just a really great time. And that, you know, since the pandemic, it was sort of an opportunity to look at how they'd always done things. And I think they've made some changes in the last couple of years that really have kind of centered on how can we give, you know, what would be best for kids. And I think it was
phenomenal. It was so fun. And everything was right there. It was the perfect amount of time. The day turned out to be perfect. It was wonderful. And so yeah, lots of time, energy, and thought were put into it, but it turned out to be beautiful.
Good. The Golden Cowboys met and got a tour of the Champion Center. That was very nice. And they were also thrilled to see the AD director, whom they all remember as Little Jeff.
Oh. That's his new nickname.
Little Jeff.
I'm sure he loves it.
All right. Anybody else? Then we'll go on to the Facilities Committee.
We're on pause, waiting for, there's all that HVAC work that's going to be happening at the start of summer.
Cool. Planning and goal setting. I guess we have already actually kind of connected with those strategic plans.
Yep, and just buildings right now are creating building goals, specific building goals.
Okay.
within the hopes that they'll be ready to go by the time summer comes along. And then we have a building leadership retreat where our building teams create the professional development plan. So we're excited about that, June 7th date. Yes.
Okay, and the policy review, I'm just gonna, that's coming, so we'll keep moving. And student achievement.
Well, I just, my update for this time is that our students have completed testing. And we're excited about the growth that we're hoping to see for our kids. Again, we're really focused on growth and how students are moving and growing and managing their own learning. And so we're excited about growth that we will see.
All right, thank you.
We didn't have it because we. Right.
We met.
No, we met before. The
Ethan
DLT
asked
met before
me.
this one. I was looking at my.
I turned it down. All right, so that needs to be in the minutes, that Dr. Whiteley just turned. Rhonda told me to, not, I mean,
We don't have enough room in the minutes for all the times we touched it.
All right,
No room.
Yes,
so
thank you, Cole.
let's work our way through these, the Board of Education report. We're having a first read of the 23-24 district calendar, 23-24, everybody. Are there comments you would like to make, Mr. Weber, on this?
I'll just throw out some of the key points of the calendar. We have a start date of August 9th for students, end date of May 22nd in this calendar year. Winter break looks like it goes from December 22nd would be the final day for students, and they would return to school on January 8th. As you look at quarter days, one of the challenges to create the best possible balance of quarters and semesters. And so this calendar is pretty balanced. And it also shifts most of the learning opportunity before the students are held accountable to their state assessments. And so it's, so you see some of those
Back
pieces.
to Zoller family Christmas in a different place. Doesn't matter because this is gonna be good for kids.
I think it gets closer every year by a day. I think when we pull out the 24-25 calendar, we'll be a day closer.
The fact that it's an even mix, which I know is really important to the teachers, and to know that we'll have things together before testing.
Yeah,
That's
and
excellent.
that's really important.
They really are tricky. I've still do this now, just being a student achievement, watching how many iterations you do with the calendar. Could you maybe, what might be helpful for other people to hear too? Because I know I feel a lot of it, and even in my own personal, I feel like, whoo, school keeps starting so early, doesn't it? I mean, I know we also want to end early. Could you just maybe speak to that of, at what point? I know some people are concerned at what point does it stop getting earlier and it starts
Right.
moving the other direction?
I think what we see is it ebbs and flows within that second week of August.
Yeah.
And it's based on the number of holidays that we have during the year. It's based on certain parameters that we've set over the course of time for winter break. And the goal of really looking at Memorial Day to finish by Memorial Day. And really what that is all about is it's making sure that the instructional days are before students are again tested. So those factors really, I think, keep us in that second week of August as a start date.
And maybe that's our good communication. I mean, I could have been saying that the whole time. It kind of has landed there, but I haven't really articulated it.
Sure.
Like that it's gonna just be.
Sure. It could shift back a week, but when it shifts back a week, right, the challenge is that for educators, it's a week less to make sure students are prepared for the assessments that they have to take.
The next is policy 2413. This is, as you read that policy, you notice there were no changes to it. It's something we just have to annually review. And so, first read of that. Or no, I guess we'll just accept it. We don't have to read it again. All right, now, first read of policies. Mr. Buckner, do you want to do this with me? Are you?
He left a while ago.
He had to go to another meeting. Oh, okay.
You
So-
got this.
I think he's saying no.
The good news is
All right.
they felt
They
manageable. There was
do.
nothing
We'll go through them
Yeah.
fairly quickly. I
Right.
don't know that there's anything that's controversial either.
Didn't feel like it.
So the very first one is listed as staff dress and grooming, and if you put 1616 together with 3216 and 4216. They end up being the same one. This is to comply with some Title IX and Title VII changes, and it's nothing. I don't
Just that first one's new, isn't it? 1616, there was no staff, it just says.
Right, it
the
picks up
newer
for the
ones, the big
staff,
ones. Yeah.
and it just, it's,
The different, is that why it's broken down? That was my question.
well, the
Like
numbers.
16 says it's because of the
Staff, three.
portion of staff.
Yeah, there's licensed staff,
Thank
there's
you.
classified staff, and
That's what.
there's,
it was like,
student.
And then 5511 is student, right?
Yeah, 5511 is coming.
But you see, there's 3 staff, so that's why I'm like.
They're certified classified administrators.
Right.
I wasn't breaking it down to administrators.
So it's 1616, 3216, 4216, and they all are staff, or they all are dress and grooming.
Yes.
Let me do it that way, and no gigantic changes, just
I saw that was
complying with
basically
the
just
titles.
saying, we're not trying to say anything about how you might gender identify, it's just come with professional standards.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, the next one is 2271, which is College Credit Plus program. The change here is this, in the green, the fact that students, male students who are over 18 will need to have been, will need to have registered for the draft, or what do we call it? Selective service.
Is it just coming back?
I believe it's always been there. It's just now it's being
Just because my
codified.
son's getting older that I
That's
really.
what happens with new kids, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
It's, and now it's,
Just like-
it's in print.
I mean, I like it.
Kind of the way we look at it. And that's Ohio law, so we're just following the law there. All right, the next one is 2370.01, and that's blended learning. Sorry, mine are out of order, so.
I'm pulling, do you want to use it on my computer?
No, because I put all my notes on
Okay.
paper. This has to do with Senate Bill 229. It's learning opportunities that are, if you look, it includes non-computer based learning opportunities, just a line we've added in. Other than that, the gist of the policy stays the same. All right, then we get to, and we have staff dress and grooming next. Hang on 1 second, give me a chance to catch up with.
No, then we're on holidays, right?
Well, we're
Or
gonna
14.
talk about that one. In fact, would you talk about that one, Dr. White? This is
So,
not what you think.
basically, this is regarding the new federal holiday of Juneteenth. And basically, we already had a policy that we are changing the number of to capture this policy. So we have a policy in place, which was 4434, and Norm has changed that number of our existing policy to 4439 to capture this inclusively.
Okay, so basically, this is just something we already have. The Juneteenth is something different, but we will incorporate it into what we already have to make us.
And we will
according to
reflect
the
the,
law.
yeah, and we will, so we switched the number of the policy, but we
Yes.
will reflect the practice in our work calendars and in our classified handbook, and you will be seeing the classified handbook next month.
So you'll approve of that. All right, then the next is dress and grooming 5511.
No,
Eligibility of
eligibility of
resident.
Eligibility of non.
5111.
I am not in order at all.
Great. It's because you probably combined the.
Well, we
others,
talked
right?
in different ways and we moved things around.
But that one's only highlighted while you're
So-
going through this slash.
Yeah, go ahead.
5111 is really a change. It was not brought to us by Norm. This is a change that we are bringing forth from kind of the leadership from Tim. Basically, we just had some language that was almost contradictory to each other, so we're just removing that sentence to provide clarity about that specific rule of 90 days when you are.
I think
That makes
was
more
good,
sense.
yeah.
And there's some verbiage that's just cleaned up to
Yeah.
put us in line with all the rest of our policies. And as Norm explained it to us, as we look at some of these new policies, or as we review some of these policies, we may change some of the language just to bring it up to date with where we are. All right, so then the next one, the weapons, 5772, includes a new definition of weapons that includes incendiary devices, explosives, and other objects defined as dangerous ordinances. It's a verbiage thing once more. The gist of it does not change. 6110, which is, I should also probably say, sorry, I put that together. 5772, I also included with 7217. And that goes back to the, for adult visitors carrying a concealed weapon is basically what that has pulled out. Now, in some cases, there are some school districts that it is your choice whether or not you allow weapons in the building. We do not. And so some of this was more in line with what a school that would let them in.
We still don't. You have to be a designated person.
We do not, right. Okay, so now we're at 6110, grant funds.
This one just talks about, it just calls out that we will maintain, will comply with maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity, which are two federal compliance pieces that we've been in compliance with, and we have to file a report annually. So it just calls out that we'll do that.
And we're doing it, we've done it anyway. And so that's not so much change as just now we're using the vocabulary. Right?
And I think would be that with the expansion of federal ESSER money, that I think folks are looking for a stipulation in your policy that said you would do that. Even though it's been a requirement that you need to have a policy that says that you'll do maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity.
Okay, and then we go into some financial ones. 6114 is cost, principles, spending federal funds.
This one talks about specifically, there is this provision in state law that we won't purchase something that's included in Part 200 of this long list of telecommunications and video surveillance equipment. It's a certain vendor. So we just have to comply that we won't buy this particular equipment, which we won't.
So weird. It's a certain Chinese vendor.
Yeah.
We're not going to have anything to do with them.
No. So we won't do that.
Sometimes, yes. 6325 is the next one. That's procurement of federal grants and funding. This is all part of this Edgar law, federal law. And basically, there's just that one line right there in the beginning. Federally funded contracts excess of $2,000 related to construction must comply with the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. So this has to do with wages.
So this is actually important for us because if you remember, we're doing that small expansion project at the high school, and we're using federal ESSER funds to do that, and so that project would comply with this. Okay. So this has an immediate impact for us. Okay.
And 6423 is about using credit cards.
This doesn't change any of our current practice. It realigns some verbiage in different pieces and designates that the treasurer or my assistant will be responsible for issuing cards if cards are lost or stolen.
Right.
Kind of just a little more specific about what our practice is.
And you notice on the page, it specifically lists who might have a card, so that brings us all, everything's completely understood. Yeah. And then the last one is 8500, which is food services. This applies especially to procuring food. Now, remember, we don't do we outsource to Milford schools. So we will have this on our books, but this isn't necessarily going to be something that applies to us.
Because it gets reevaluated every 2 years.
Right, right.
Food in many ways, but just the overall food that we serve. And could you remind me how that's looked at? Like, we landed on Milford, but I know we've been with them for a long time, but how often that is looked at?
Yeah, our contract actually, unless either one of us notify each other that we're going to part ways, then there's just an annual renewal.
Okay.
It just happens.
Okay.
I don't know that anyone else is
an endeavor if we were to go back to either running a food service operation ourselves or to partner with another external vendor.
All right, that's a first read, and we will have a second read next time. May I have a motion to approve the Board of Education report? May I have a second? Or I have a first and a second here. If you want to put Yulia down. Roll call, please.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Barger.
Yes. Thank you. All right, thank you. Turn the page. We're at the treasurer's report.
Thanks, Jeannie. Item A, approve the minutes from the March 28th regular meeting, and there's a typo there, sorry, the April 12th, 2022 planning meeting. Approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending March 31st. Accept with appreciation the list of donations from the Wyoming School Foundation. Appropriation adjustments for the month of April, item D. Item E is an annual piece to participate in our workers' compensation group rating program. And item F is the annual resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and then authorizing those and certifying them to the county auditor. I should explain that in my update, but that's just an annual piece for us and it's part of our budget process.
Right.
Item G, approval of the report, please.
All right, may I have a motion to approve? So moved. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call?
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Barger.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. We have several personnel items. Number one is a recommendation to approve new personnel for next year. And Taylor Jervis has done a great job this year, so we're excited to see her continue. Number two is detailing some personnel changes where we have an educational aide who will be moving into the role of a primary administrative assistant role. And then one of our recess aides is going to be moving into a library aide position. Again, capitalize on great experience that these folks have, they can bring to students and staff. Number three, recommendation to approve unpaid leave. Number four, recommendation to approve an acting health specialist, and this is in connection with the eighth grade trip to Chicago. Number five, recommendation to approve financial literacy curriculum work. This is a new course at the high school, and this is to develop the curriculum for that course. Number six, recommendation to approve library inventory work. We do have some staff members who are going to be transitioning to new locations, and so this will support those transitions and inventory work that is happening within each one of those libraries in our schools. Number seven is a recommendation to approve the renewal of these educational aides, cafeteria and recess aides, library aides, clinic aides, health specialists, parent resource liaison, mentor, and just critical roles. So just an opportunity to say thank you to these people for the incredible work that they do every single day to help students be successful. And number eight, we have a recommendation to approve two continuing contracts for next year. If you want to hit some
The
highlights
first
of
one,
these folks.
yeah, the first one is a high school Spanish teacher, Dr. Chris Arrieta Dennis. If you have ever met Mr. Arrieta Dennis, he builds an infectious culture in his classroom. He builds in a learning environment where students feel safe and they're able to be vulnerable and they really feel the care and the fostering of love and support that he provides in their exploration, not only of the language, but also the culture. His kids take risks, right? Oftentimes they're engaging in conversation and they're not afraid to fail or use words that are maybe a stretch for them or haven't been introduced. And he really fosters that nurturing environment while coupling that with really strong instructional strategies and a myriad of instructional strategies. So you see that differentiation and you see that scaffolding. His assessment, I don't even think kids sometimes realize that they're being assessed, right? It's very conversational, very dialogue based. And I think that promotes that culture of safety and of engagement. Mr. Arrieta Dennis has been really integral in bringing in AP Spanish literature. We've had AP Spanish language for a really long time, but this was the first year at the high school that literature was introduced. Mr. Arrieta Dennis's background is really Spanish culture, specifically modern culture. And so you see him weave that into the Spanish literature course and really bring it alive. He's a true champion for kids. You not only see that in the classroom, but if you've visited the new restaurant at the Array place, he is bringing kids in his classrooms down to his work, right? They're being servers, he's teaching them a language and immersing them in different ways. He's also really good at promoting outside opportunities in the classroom, whether that be through field trips or site visits or just Skype or Zoom and things of that nature. For 3 years, he was also our Spanish club faculty advisor. So even when he was new to our building, he was really getting immersed and bringing our kids different opportunities. He invites guest speakers. Again, he promotes studying abroad and bringing in those cultural aspects. And he's really a constant leader in his department. Like I said, he was integral in bringing AP Spanish language, but he pushes us to think differently. He pushes the department to kind of look at that balance between grammar, right, that kind of traditional approach to more that hands-on engaging learner approach. And so, you know, we often say in education that culture eats strategy for lunch. And Dr. Area then truly embraces that in his classroom every day by promoting not only language, but culture immersion for the students. Thank you. Our second one, and I feel like, yep, I'm down here. I feel like I should turn, right? Tyler. He is an intervention specialist at the middle school, and I cannot say enough how much his focus is.
Don't do that.
Oh, yeah. Let's
Elias is staring at Jeannie. Nothing like that. You're a lovely person to see. I'm so sorry, Tyler.
Tyler's focus is really students each and every day. He advocates for his students, and he really strives to make sure that they have all the wonderful opportunities available to them. This year specifically, I have seen for him to go above and beyond and really advocate to ensure a kid has everything they need, whether that be for the classroom or for Camp Kern. Additionally, he spends a lot of his own personal hours, even the weekends, making phone calls and really making sure that those kids walk in and have everything they need from start to finish of the school day and beyond. He also serves as a mentor to his peers. He provides his team with strategies and best practices, and you really lead that sixth grade team to ensure alignment and provide differentiation opportunities in all areas of instruction. He really works closely with admin and counselors to make sure that, again, he's advocating for kids and that his students have everything they need. He takes on challenges and he seeks solutions. I have been at the table with him this year, thinking through and problem solving staff solutions and leave situations and how we can better equip staff to make sure that they are ready for all students. He has a passion for his students that is just palpable. I mean, you can feel it when he has conversations about his kids and in his team meetings. He's a natural leader and he has such a positive energy. And I think you saw that that positive energy radiates even in his calmness, like when he's presenting from CAC. He builds relationships with students, our families, and our staff. And his colleagues really know that he's a springboard and they have super respect for his knowledge and skills, as do our students and our families.
Absolutely. Very nice.
I mean, it's true.
Good sense of humor.
Even the kids who don't have you, I know they're like, we don't post it notes on us, whatever it is. Sorry about that, but I mean, like, they clearly feel comfortable with you. So, right? Maybe too comfortable.
So will you be here at 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning? It's like clockwork. I judge.
It is a little late.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe he's not going home.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
one of my favorite parts too, though, when you really talk about, when this part comes up and you
It is.
really get to talk about
This is a
why
commitment.
and who we're doing and not just, oh, me. Yeah. it is a
We're
big
making
commitment.
a commitment to them and they're making a commitment to us.
Right.
So I think the continued
Love to
contract
hear
is an
It's powerful.
important thing.
It's so interesting when you talk to students and they talk about the best experience or what's best about their experience here in Wyoming. It always goes back to our staff, and it's always about staff who go above and beyond to do whatever it takes to help me feel good, to be successful outside of class. It's about the time before class and after class, and it's like the two individuals that we just described. Super powerful, and many more. Okay. Almost there. Number 9. Speaking of great folks, renewal of certified limited contracts. And so again, thank you to these people for the incredible work. And that's such an understatement as you think about this year, the second year of a pandemic, which many people said is been much more challenging than the first year. But you see the enthusiasm and energy in our buildings. It's amazing. So thank you to these folks. Number 10, again, this time of year, we do approve individuals who, staff members whose children are attending Wyoming City Schools for next year. Number 11 is recommendation to approve a athletic supplemental contract. That's for this year, and it's a reserve baseball coach. Number 12, another athletic supplemental contract for this year, the varsity baseball assistant coach. Number 13, these is a recommendation to approve 2 summer camps, summer programs, great opportunities for students. The summer string fling at the middle school and the primary summer reading camp support needs. And then number 14 is recommendation to approve van driver, and that is for the continuation of this year. And then switching gears, item B, we have 2 overnight field trips. These are trips that are planned for next year. So recommendation to approve the senior trip to Washington, D.C. And then the choir will be traveling to Disney next year.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
I'll second it. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Jean?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and another superintendent's report.
Yep, just one other personnel item, and that's just another approval of certified limited contract. And this is for the 22-23 school year.
All right, may I have a motion to approve that? Report, please. So moved. May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Zoller?
I abstain.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Jean?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Well, superintendent's report, update.
Okay. Seeing it's about 10 o'clock.
Oh,
We, I probably just have, I'll keep it brief, 5 minutes or so.
Not fair.
Oh, that's what you
So,
know. You know that.
No, so.
I got it. You totally. He's
So,
got 10, I did.
I will say.
Got 10 of five.
I will say, oh, interesting. No, all right, so, I just want to say, as we near the end of April, head into May, just an exciting time of the year. And Carrie, you spoke about prom, and what a great celebration of students. And so we're going to be entering that time where we're celebrating so many wonderful things in academics, in the arts, in athletics. And so a lot to be proud of for our students and for the great work that our staff members have done to help students achieve at incredible levels. And so we're looking forward to those celebrations in May, our May meeting. Again, we'll be having that at the middle school so that we can bring those celebrations to us and acknowledge, again, the great work that is happening. And then we had a wonderful weekend. You saw students in the activities that we were talking about. You see students come out of the schools after school, and they're out and about throughout the Wyoming community. So we're excited about what springtime offers. With that in mind, we are talking to kiddos about how we can be good citizens in our school buildings and outside of our school buildings as we enjoy the great things throughout the Wyoming community that are community businesses, and just talking about how we're good neighbors. So lots to be excited about as we end the school year pretty quickly.
And actually, I think this Thursday, there is a recognition for students going into the arts.
There is.
And board members and administration invited, I believe. So. Yes.
Yeah.
And anyway, I know this was a long meeting, but I haven't been able to attend that many in person, and this was so worth it. This was like, I learned a lot, and I'm always so appreciative of the amount of information that the board gets, and therefore, like, people watching or may decide to tune in for a portion, get to learn, and it really does help us to know so much about what's going on in the schools, to be able to correct any misinformation, to advocate, and it's really great to have this much shared with us, and just very appreciative.
And phenomenal work brings it to this point. And I love to hear the whole idea of alignment. And when you notice it, that matters, right? It really matters when the arrows are all going in the same direction. We're supporting one another with that work.
The teachers are still hanging in at 10 p.m.
They're great.
Let's wrap this up.
We love them. All right.
Still have a few minutes.
May,
No, I think we're wrapping. Go. He's trying to win.
it's 10 o'clock. May I have a
Oh, yeah.
motion to?
What, Ilya?
Are you still talking, Heather?
I guess I don't have a motion to adjourn.
Not yet.
Ilya, go for it. What did you?
No, he's just making fun of me.
Oh, he's just making fun of you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was all.
In case you needed that explained further.
All right, may I have a motion to
Yeah, that was it.
adjourn?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll?
Mrs. Roderick,
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas, Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.